Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in these southern United States. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you have anything to add, you can leave us a voicemail. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We've got a lot to talk about today. As you can see, if you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, we have our unionized tees in. Really, really cool looking shirts made by Dignity Apparel, a union print shop in Tennessee. It is a southern union print shop. It's really cool. They don't have the traditional bug on them, but they have a little tag at the bottom of the shirt here that says Union Made that is visible. So really cool. I will be mailing those out on Monday. So if you have already ordered a unionized tee, then you can be looking for that in your mailbox soon. If you have not ordered one and are looking at me and want to look almost as good as me, then you can go to tvlr.fm/store and try to nab one for yourself. The United Campus Workers of America is a division of the Communication Workers of America, UCWCWA, and they are organizing. They're organizing campus workers, right? United Campus Workers organizing campus workers, right? That makes sense. And they have several locals or several chapters across the state of Alabama. And the United Campus Workers is a really cool project because they are organizing campus workers even in places where there are not official structures for collective bargaining, right? Many public sector workers in states across the country do not have the right, quote unquote, to collective bargaining. There is no formal process for elections and there's no mandate on the employer to bargain collectively. And in some cases, there's even a prohibition on public sector employers from bargaining collectively with their employees. But workers can still organize. Obviously, we have a First Amendment freedom of association in this country while it lasts. And this is how unions started, actually. People were organizing unions while it was expressly illegal to do so. People were carrying union cards in their back pockets while you could be arrested for having such a thing on your person, right? And so it's obviously not that dire on college campuses, but in many cases, like I said, they don't have the right to collective bargaining. And so they are organizing outside of that process. They are just declaring themselves to be a union, and they are moving forward thusly, right? They are fighting for higher wages. They are fighting for better benefits. They're fighting for better working conditions, whether or not they are recognized by their administration. We have a voicemail from a United Campus Workers member in Alabama, Lance at Jacksonville State University, who they actually had a really great win at the university. I think it was just last year when they got the university to raise their minimum wage by something like 10 to 15%. And again, this is without a formal election. This is without recognition of their union by management. This was without formal collective bargaining. This is just good old-fashioned pressure tactics and direct action that has gotten the goods for workers at Jacksonville State University here in the state of Alabama, and they're fighting for more. Here's Lance talking about what the campus workers were up to in Alabama and across the country last week.
Hey, Adam. Hey, Jacob. This is Lance Ingwerson. I'm a co-chair at United Campus Workers Local 3821, the campus co-chair at Jacksonville State University. Just calling to let your listeners know about a great event we had this past Thursday, April the 17th. It was a day of action across public higher education institutions across the United States. Over 150 events that were happening in person, others that were happening online, including at the University of Alabama. Auburn University had done theirs the week before. Just a great way to mobilize solidarity around. All three of our campuses are working on living wage campaigns for workers, all with campus-specific demands. But just a great show of energy and support. We brought in some new members and really, I think, did a good job of raising more awareness around everything that's going on. Public higher education is in a pretty vulnerable state right now with the closures to the downsizing of the Department of Education, the pausing of lots of different kinds of federal grants, like from the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, and we're out there trying to work to push back against a lot of these cuts and other kinds of things that are going on. So just wanted to let listeners know solidarity, and hope you all have a great show. Thanks.
Thanks for the voicemail, Lance. Really appreciate it. If you have any union updates that you would like us to know, particularly if you are in the South, we would love to hear it. Leave us a voicemail at any time at 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Adam, you were down there with Lance last week. Talk to us some more about the event.
Sure, yeah. It was a Solidarity at the Square, and it was downtown in Jacksonville. Very pretty little downtown. And there was a nice area in the square where we got to post up, and they were there throughout the day with signs, with music, and had a tent, and folks could stop by from the community, folks who were, coming from campus, because it was just, a short little walk from campus. So it was a great community solidarity kind of event. I got a chance to go down there for a little while and, show my support, because I, like Jacob, been really impressed with United Campus Workers. To stick to the Jacksonville event first, I will say that we got a lot of honks, and I had no middle fingers. Nobody flipped me off. And so that is always a good sign waving action when you get more honks than middle fingers. But got a lot of support from the community, got a chance to meet some new people out there in Calhoun County in that area who were doing great work in the community. And so that was a great connection. Met some people that I already knew through Alabama Rise and through other organizations. So just a great opportunity to network and connect people, all in the name of worker solidarity. These workers are fighting for living wages. And as Lance mentioned, in really tough conditions nationally when it comes to higher education. So it was a National Day of Action. As Lance mentioned, the chapter down at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa also had a rally for a living wage. And just want to share a couple of things about that. So members of the UA chapter of the United Campus Workers Southeast are calling for a flat $5,000 cost of living adjustment for all workers, and an increase in the hourly minimum wage to $20 to account for years of inflation. Pay isn't the only issue that concerns UCW members. The call for UA to take seriously its investment in its employees is part of a larger call to reinvest in higher education instead of devaluing it with cuts to the arts and sciences and attacks on academic freedom. So they rallied to demand that the university defend academic freedom and resist increasing government pressures to determine how and what they teach. They stood in support of legal action taken by university faculty against the implementation of SB 129. That's the bill that you may remember from last year that was passed that formally banned DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, in our public institutions here in Alabama. So the members in Tuscaloosa were also demanding that the university make it clear it will not collaborate with efforts to shape research through punitive actions against institutions and academics. They were demanding the university commit to supporting international students in a time of grave uncertainty and fear by allocating resources for legal support as well as stipends for students unable to safely travel or work over the summer. So really appreciated the workers down there in Tuscaloosa doing that rally, appreciated the workers at Jacksonville State. And as Lance mentioned, Auburn had some actions last week. And I do want to point out that they are growing. So United Campus Workers really got it kicked off in Tennessee. They have a strong presence there in Tennessee, but they have grown throughout the South and even outside the South, from what I hear. But I will say that they are organizing on campuses across the state of Alabama and across the Southeast. So if you are listening and you work at a public college or university, or you know someone who does, you have a union. They have a union. And that's important to know, because a lot of folks who work at these public colleges and universities think that because they don't have the legal right to collective bargaining, because they don't have the legal right to strike, as other workers do, in the private sector or in other states at public colleges and other public sector jobs, because they don't have these legal rights on paper, that, they can't unionize, or they can't have a union, they can't belong to a union. I've heard that for years throughout my time in the movement. I just saw, a poor brother in another state making that comment on Facebook this morning in an education group. He said, I'm in Georgia, I can't unionize. And the truth is, when two or more workers gather in the name of building power for themselves and their coworkers, that's a union, right? If you act collectively as an organization, you can build power and you can be a union. Whether or not your employer recognizes it, whether or not the government recognizes it, whether or not you can ever obtain a collective bargaining agreement, the point is the power, the collective power, the collective organization, the collective action you can take together to win for yourself and for your coworkers and ultimately for the entire community. So I have a lot of respect for the folks in United Campus Workers. They have been very, very busy. They have been growing over the years. They've been doing events like this, Solidarity at the Square, like the rally at UA, to connect with folks. I know last year when the Poor People's Campaign had their big march in Montgomery, I ran into a lot of members of UCW, and it was really great to see that, to see them as part of a broader movement. And so when I think about the labor movement in Alabama and where we're at right now and where some of the energy is at, that definitely comes to mind, the United Campus Workers. I think we'll be seeing more public chapters soon. I know that they are building their network at various other institutions. And, again, if you know folks who work at these colleges and universities, let them know they have a choice, they have an option, they have the ability to get plugged in to a union, CWA, Communications Workers of America, which I would argue also, in terms of where the energy's at in Alabama's labor movement, we've seen a lot of energy from CWA with success at Wells Fargo, in Anniston, success in Anniston with the New Flyer campaign, which was an IUE CWA effort. And we've seen my local CWA 3908 add some retail shops, as well as Alabama Arise Staff Union, right? So a lot of wins for CWA, a lot of momentum for CWA, and shout out again to Lance. I've gotten the pleasure to know Lance a little bit through my time in the movement these last couple of years, and I'm just really impressed with him and his coworkers, and the passion they have, the dedication they have. That's one thing I love about doing what I do and being part of the labor movement, is you get to meet a lot of really great people, a lot of just leaders out here in the working class who are fighting to make life better for themselves and their families, their coworkers, their community. And I really commend them and commend all the folks who are organizing, whatever job you have, or whether you're public sector, private sector, whatever kind of institution you work for. If you're organizing with your coworkers, you are to be commended, because you're doing the right thing. It's the way we build power for ourselves and make our lives better.
Absolutely. Appreciate everybody tuning in to the chat. Saying, Gus said there's a weird rumble in the sound as Adam has been talking. Never mind, it just stopped. That might have been me typing, potentially. Gus says, I see you're gonna have Bob Funk on. Say hello for me. We went to the same college at the same time, but didn't meet until an AFL-CIO organizing day last year. Very cool. Bill says, greetings from another valley up in Ohio. Claydonia says, good morning. Quirky Girl says, good morning from Toronto. Brandon says, good morning in solidarity. Sam says, good morning, all solidarity. Appreciate everybody tuning in. On Facebook, as always, we've got Joe and Mel. Thank y'all for tuning in. I believe we should have Naomi and Briar in the Zoom. Is that right? Okay, great. So Starbucks Workers United, Adam was talking about unions that have that are really leading the labor movement with vibrance and interesting campaigns. I think Starbucks Workers United is obviously going to be one of those campaigns.
Absolutely.
In the last 2 or 3 years, having organized 10,000 workers at hundreds of stores, including 2 in Alabama, where workers unionized, a long time ago now, in Birmingham and Scottsboro. Now joining them, a 3rd store in Alabama, the Huntsville location off of University and the Parkway, has filed for a union election. Their election will be coming up soon. One of their baristas was going to be trying to join us this morning, but Naomi Wilson from Birmingham is also on. Naomi Wilson from the Birmingham store, and I do think that Briar Wolf is on now. So Naomi and Briar, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Really appreciate y'all taking the time to talk to us.
Yes,
Hi,
thank
Jacob.
you. Hi.
Really glad, Naomi, to have you back on, and Briar to have you on for the first time. Briar, I know that your time is a little bit more limited, so I want to start off with you. Like I said, you are from the Huntsville location that has recently filed a petition to hold a union election, the store off of University and the Parkway. Can you tell us what made y'all, pull the trigger, so to speak? It's been a while since the Starbucks Workers United campaign kicked off, and so what made y'all want to unionize at this time?
Well, so a lot of what the impetus was for this was the management in the store right now is creating kind of a toxic environment. The scheduling is really bad. We're understaffed for a whole lot of shifts. We wind up having to close the store a lot because of the poor scheduling. So people miss out on their hours, and they're told that they have to use their vacation time or their sick time to make up for those hours.
Wow.
And also one of the management staff is consistently misgendering transgender partners and kind of creating an uncomfortable and hostile feeling work environment for us here.
Yeah, that's really frustrating. I mean, especially the idea that, if management closes the store, I mean, obviously you haven't even had an election yet, so you're obviously not striking, right? So the idea that management is going to close the store and then say you have to use your paid leave to make up for these hours is a very, very frustrating, that would be very frustrating. And so I can imagine that would make you want to unionize and have some level of stability and control over these sorts of things, over the place where you spend, the majority of your waking life. And so how are your coworkers feeling after having filed for an election?
The attitude and the mood around the store has actually changed a lot. It's a lot more positive now. People are more upbeat because they can kind of see that that proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. That there are things happening. There are things that can change, and that we as a combined unit, we could make a difference. We can make them listen to us. Because one person stepping up and saying this, and another person stepping up and saying that, a lot of people have wound up fired because of it. So as a group, they can't fire us all. Right. If we all step up and say, "Hey, we're tired of this. We don't want to be treated this way anymore." And now, hey, look, we're legally protected now. You can't treat us this way anymore. That's going to be great. Our election's coming up May 12th. There'll be 2 sessions, one in the morning and one in the afternoon on May 12th. And after that, we're really looking forward to trying to make some big changes around here.
Yeah, absolutely. How has management reacted since you filed for the election?
We have had one session where one of the management team pulled people to the side and talked to them. Can we understand your concerns? What made you feel like you needed to do this? And just they haven't said or done anything that would violate any kind of rules or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you get the feeling,
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Briar, best of luck in the election. We're going to be tracking it closely, obviously. Thanks for telling us the date of the election. Glad that it's been scheduled already, May 12th. Encourage union supporters to go by, again, the Starbucks off of University and the Parkway. Let them know that you support them in their campaign. Naomi Wilson, you're at the Birmingham location that has unionized and has been unionized for a while now. How are folks in your store reacting to this news of another Alabama location, seeking to join y'all?
Genuinely just pure excitement. Like, I think it's about time people realize that they have a voice in their workplace. Everything Briar has talked about is a very common issue in Starbucks locations. We had those tornadoes come through Alabama and they shut down our store, and none of us got paid for that time that we were scheduled for. And so we're going to be filing disputes on that so that they have to pay us for our time.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. And what have y'all been seeing in the intervening period in Birmingham since you've unionized? Well, what's been going on in the store?
Oh boy, well, a lot has happened at my store. Being the first one to unionize in the state, our store just heavily got union busted. I wasn't at the original election, and so I came in years later. And kind of how I started getting involved is I was being overly dress coded. So they were enforcing rules at our store that weren't even actual rules. And so I reached out when I found out that our store was unionized, and they kind of told me yeah, that's the result of union busting. They do not want you guys to know what you have as your rights. They're making sure that there's a rotating door so that nobody ever learns. Yeah, pretty much that. That's been the case for 2 years. It's taken me a long time to grow into the organizer and leader that I need to be. And so I'm very happy that I'm here now. And that doesn't mean that the union busting has stopped. Every time we grow, they hit us 10 times harder. And so we started actually doing Union 101s for our community. Kind of teaching about how to get organized, what do you need, what can you do, what's the difference, what kind of protections you can get from that. And actually the DM, district manager, saw me at one of those locations, hopped up out of his chair, walked over to the workers that I had just canvassed, took their flyers, and just, was pretending to be the nice guy. I've never seen him smile in my life. And the following day, he came into our store, our Union 20th Street store, and he issued 7 write-ups. And not only just that, he also went ahead and declined a short-term disability of one of my coworkers that had filed weeks ago because she had broke her foot. So this is just an insane amount of retaliation that we get at our store for just speaking up about what we have available to us. But that doesn't mean that we have, fumbled our bag. Under pressure grows diamonds. And I think that we're just getting stronger every single day, and they know that, and that's why they're targeting us even harder.
Absolutely. You mentioned the dress code that you said was being more rigorously enforced at the Birmingham store maybe than it otherwise would have been. Starbucks recently announced a new dress code for workers across the country. Now, legally, this should not be enforced at the union Starbucks locations because you're supposed to have status quo until bargaining concludes, and that would include the Huntsville store because status quo is supposed to begin from the time that you file an election. So, legally, this new dress code should not be being rolled out at union stores. Starbucks Workers United is challenging the new dress code. Have they tried to roll that out either at Starbucks in Huntsville or Birmingham, Briar, Naomi?
Yeah, so pretty much our union really ran a really strong campaign on workplace visibility, making sure that you're comfortable and able to present how you want to. And Starbucks played played the game and gave us a more progressive dress code. But now that the administration and the top levels have changed, and Trump is constantly trying to dismantle the NLRB, Starbucks is taking that step and taking that power back from us. And they're like, we actually don't have to give you those things. We actually don't care that you bought all of this coffee gear. Those are all now void. You can only wear black. And it's a pressure campaign to make people want to quit and keep that door revolving so that we can't grow strong union stores. I think now is the time more than ever to recognize that you can't win anything unless it's in a contract with Starbucks. And so, I'm really excited to go back to bargaining with them so that we can finally finalize this and show people their power and what they deserve.
Absolutely.
And
well,
one
yeah,
thing
go ahead,
I've got
Brian.
to add about that, they have not started trying to enforce the dress code, the new dress code here in Huntsville. But Naomi might not have seen this, but this morning, after a lot of outcry from partners about this new dress code, especially the part that she was talking about people buying all the coffee gear shirts from Starbucks that were assumed to be dress code friendly, they've rolled back part of the new dress code. And now they're saying that coffee gear shirts are acceptable again, as long as they're all black.
Well, that's
interesting.
Yeah, that's something for sure. And it's really interesting that they're wanting to roll out this dress code to try to to give everybody a uniform, basically, because that is, it just doesn't. I don't know. When I go into Starbucks, I expect to see people with the green apron with all sorts of different that's sort of the vibe that I have always felt like they were going for.
Yeah. Them barista. We make the best coffee. And everyone knows it. Everyone knows if your barista doesn't have blue hair, it's not going to come out right.
That's right. Yeah, and especially talking about the blue hair stuff. I mean, after all these planes have been flying out of the sky, I don't know that I'm comfortable flying with any pilot that doesn't have at least 4 pronouns. I mean, this is becoming a real difficult sort of environment. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate the Starbucks Workers United campaign. It means a lot to me as a unionist what y'all are doing, to see the kind of power that you're trying to build and that you are building against really tough odds. And I appreciate you sharing, keeping it real about the conditions you're facing, but keeping the hope alive that, by coming together, you are stronger and you can fight back and you can win. So just know that there are a lot of us out here pulling for you, cheering for you, and really inspired by the leadership you're showing. And so really hoping to see a win in May in Huntsville. Will be great for all of us union folks in North Alabama to be able to frequent that store. And, I want to just, send my solidarity and support to those of y'all in Birmingham. Anything that we can do in the community to support y'all, we've got your back.
Yep.
Can I
Firewolf, Naomi
say
Wilson.
Real quick?
Go ahead.
Our big call to action right now is actually to support our coworker who has been denied short-term disability. We have filed a dispute with that with Starbucks corporate, and it just takes some time. So you can find their GoFundMe link on our Starbucks Workers United BHAM page. It's SB Workers United BHAM. If you can't donate, please just share it. We need eyes on it. She got screwed over super hard by the company, and this is just unfair retaliation. I think this is a prime example of how they put profits over people. They don't even take care of their own people in the store. So we're here to do that. We got us. That's all. Thank you.
Briar Wolf, Naomi Wilson from the Huntsville and Birmingham Starbucks, respectively. Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right, folks. There you have it. New union in Huntsville. Really looking forward to getting some union
exciting.
coffee. I mean, unironically, I am so excited about that because there's not a union coffee store in my city, and now there will be. So looking forward to it. We're going to take a break really quick. We're going to be right back with Ryan Kaggel, who is running for state senate in Alabama, to talk to him about his campaign, see what he's up to. Stay tuned, folks. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger food drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no coal. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. Today, we talk to Alabama State Senate candidate Ryan Kaggel about his campaign. We just finished a conversation with 2 Starbucks baristas in Alabama about their union campaign, and we will be taking a look at last week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch, all that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show, we've got a phone number. You can leave us a voicemail at any time at 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can do that at any point. We just played a voicemail earlier in the program as well, so we might respond to it on the next show if you leave us a voicemail. If you want to interact with us live, you can do that in the YouTube or Facebook chats. We have a lot of people tuning in. Go ahead and like the stream and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. We appreciate everybody tuning in. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm, but we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to make a one-time contribution or become a sustaining donor to the program, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/the Valley Labor Report. We have a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. And finally, we got our unionized tees in, so I'll be mailing those out this week. Appreciate everybody's patience on that. And if you're a member of a union, think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that at tvlr.fm/contact.
Hey y'all, let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. As most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in. Whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener, we appreciate you spending some time with us.
Absolutely. With that, let's jump right into Last Week in Southern Labor. Last Week in Southern Labor is a segment that we do every week where we take a look at what workers were up to in the southern United States. These sorts of things don't make the news a lot, but there is always a lot happening. Workers are always filing for union elections. Workers are winning union elections. Workers are winning contracts, striking, rallying, all sorts of stuff, and so we want to highlight that wherever we can. Here's what they were up to from the 11th to the 18th of April. In new union campaigns, workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local 429, as the union representing 39 workers at Casey Fork Electric Cooperative in McMinnville, Tennessee. 10 workers at Stanley Access Technologies in Louisville, Kentucky filed a petition to hold a union election with IBEW Local 369. 19 workers at Prestige Painting Worldwide in Lee Summit, Missouri filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, Local 2012. 22 workers at SBM Management Services in Stanton, Tennessee filed a petition to hold a union election with the Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA, Local 386. 185 workers at United Natural Foods Incorporated in Pompano Beach, Florida filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 769. 21 workers at Best Virginia Heating and Cooling in Hurricane, West Virginia filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Association of Plumbers and Steam Fitters, UA Local 625. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the United Steelworkers, USW Local 13-1, as the union representing 14 workers at Centerpoint Energy Resources Corporation in Texas City, Texas. That is an awesome name for a town. 66 workers at the Washington Post in Washington, D.C. filed a petition to hold a union election with the News Guild, CWA. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE Local 465, as the union representing 27 workers at Duke Duke Riley Hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina, and 14 workers at Appalachian Power in Roanoke, Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with IBEW Local 978. In election results, 16 workers at Starbucks in Purcell, Oklahoma, voted 7-7 in a union election with Starbucks Workers United, and ties go to the employer, but workers prevailed in another Oklahoma store with 18 workers voting 15-2 in favor of unionization. 29 workers at TCO People's Gas in Sarasota, Florida, voted 7-19 against unionization with IBEW Local 108. 6 workers at K and Associates in New Orleans, Louisiana, voted 6-0 in favor of unionization with IUE-CWA. 20 security guards at Paragon in Washington, D.C. voted in favor of unionization with the Security Police and Fire Professionals of America, SPFPA, by 2 votes to 1 vote for the, with 1 vote being for the National Capital Union for Security Officers. It was a 3-way election between 2 unions and no union. No votes for no union. 24 workers at Consolidated Waste Services in Trujillo Alto, Puerto Rico, voted 7-14 against unionization with the General Workers Center. In grievances, unfair labor practices, and court cases, a lawsuit has been brought by the Solidarity Center, the AFL-CIO's international arm, among others, challenging the termination of workers' rights programs funded by the International Labor Affairs Bureau. The AFL-CIO says the International Labor Affairs Bureau funded programs helped workers form independent unions in Mexico to enforce labor rights in the U.S. trade deals like the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, and crack down on child labor in West Africa's coca sector, an industry that directly supplies U.S. chocolate manufacturers. Cutting these programs harms all working people by removing the essential tools that help stop the global race to the bottom in wages and standards. The AFL-CIO brought a lawsuit against the Trump administration for its dismantling of the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services, FMCS. The AFL-CIO says that the FMCS is a small but important independent agency that is integral to the federal government's labor relations infrastructure. Among the critical services FMCS provides is helping resolve contract negotiations between workers and employers to protect both the economy and workers' rights, generating more than $500 million in national economic savings each year, even by conservative estimates. The Communication Workers of America's CWA Committee for Better Banks released a new report warning that Wells Fargo, where they represent workers at dozens of locations, is sliding back into its harmful sales practices that led to scandal in 2016. The United Mine Workers of America, UMWA, and the United Steelworkers, USW, are suing the Trump administration over their rolling back enforcement of the Department of Labor's new silica rule. In strikes and bargaining updates, Machinists Union members at ULA tell me that the negotiating committee came to a tentative agreement with the company. We'll have more details on that next week. The contract will cover 600 workers in California, Alabama, and Florida. UE higher ed locals are calling on universities and unions to agree to a mutual academic defense compact to protect the independence of institutions and international students. Veterans Affairs Secretary Collins issued a memo allowing unions to continue collectively bargaining with the agency if their national union is not party to lawsuits against the Trump administration. The American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, which represents most VA employees, said the move was outrageous and cowardly. Teamster pilots at Allegiant Airlines have taken one step closer to striking. They sought release from arbitration from the National Mediations Board. Drivers at Shepherd's Distribution in Jefferson City, Missouri, unionized with the Teamsters, Local 833, ratified a new collective bargaining agreement containing a 10% wage increase over the life of the 3-year contract. Drivers for Wave Transit, the company that handles public transportation in Mobile, Alabama, who are unionized with the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU, Local 770, ratified a new agreement with the company. Details about the agreement are not public, but the union is less than enthused about the deal. Bus drivers for Transdev in Houston, Texas, who are unionized with Teamsters Local 988, ratified a new collective bargaining agreement with access to the Teamsters pension plus sick days for the first time ever. Workers for First Student, a bus company that services some schools in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, who recently unionized with ATU Local 1546, voted to take a job action if management refuses to agree to a fair contract. The action could disrupt bus services for 10 10,000 students if the company doesn't come back to the table. The American Postal Workers Union, APWU, released an update on bargaining with the Postal Service, saying more or less that things are not going well. Nurses for the New Orleans University Medical Center, who are unionized with the National Nurses United, will hold a rally at a 10K sponsored by the hospital, protesting their stalling in negotiations. Kroger workers in Georgia and a couple of stores in East Alabama, unionized with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW Local 1996, ratified new contracts with raises and protection of pensions. In political and legislative updates, U.S. Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer had a busy week speaking at the Teamsters Unity Conference and going to Miami to speak with leadership of the Port and the Longshoremen's Union. No report on her opposing the rolling back of the silica rule to protect America's coal miners. A new NPR report details how the Doge Bros stole sensitive data from the NLRB involving unions, cases, etc. that have nothing to do with processes or efficiency, tried to digitally cover their tracks, and shortly after the agency experienced login attempts from a Russian IP address. The whistleblower reported being intimidated as he tried to raise alarms within the agency, including by having a note taped to his door with his personal information and a picture of him walking his dog that had been taken overhead by a drone. Crazy. If we missed anything, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact. I will, obviously, and if you want to make sure that you're subscribed to the newsletter at tvlr.fm, because there's going to be a lot more in the newsletter. We never have time. We've had to shorten the segments of Last Week in Southern Labor to make room for our other content. So there's a lot of stuff that's included in the newsletters that are not included in the radio segment. So if you want the full exhaustive digest, tvlr.fm. And if you would like something included, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact. We should have Ryan Kaggel on the line, right? Okay, very cool. Really quickly before that, Kenny says, also saw the Rural Letter Carriers Union achieved a tentative agreement that looks suspiciously similar to the city carriers contract. That's going to be frustrating, I'm sure, for the rural carriers. I'm going to want to try to talk to them. Kenny said, if I ordered a unionized t-shirt, would it be the one Jacob is wearing or the one pictured on your store website? Thanks for all you do. They're the same, aren't they? They should be the same. If they're not, then we need to change the picture. But it will be the one.
Yeah, good looking out. We'll check that.
We'll check that.
We'll
but it's going to be
on
they all look like this. So hopefully that's okay. I don't know. That should be what's on the site though. Ryan Kaggel is running for State Senate District 5 in Alabama. Ryan Kaggel, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, stoked to be here. Thank y'all.
Really happy that you took the time. Really do appreciate it. Let's start with your background and your motivation for running. Right? I mean, most people don't run for state senate. Most people don't run for office. And so just give us a little bit of try to help us understand what made you want to take this step.
Yeah, so I'm a minister in the Disciples of Christ tradition, but I've kind of been all over the Christian spectrum over the years, and community organizer here in Walker County, working on multiple fronts. And a lot of the motivation, honestly, it all came as even a surprise to me, and I think to a lot of people in my immediate family and friend circles, because I've been fairly ambivalent in life about electoral politics, but over the last 3 years in particular, I've just seen the continual failure of our state leadership to address the needs of poor and working class communities, particularly in Walker County, where I'm situated. We've been fighting the good fight on multiple fronts around food insecurity, just poverty related issues, food scarcity and the opioid crisis, and then also just dealing with the larger structures of leadership that fail to hold people accountable. And so those things kind of just pushed me, after a lot of prayer and reflection and conversations with people in my life, to try to at least fight a fight, even if it may seem like a losing battle on the forefront.
What is some of the work that you've been doing in your community around, particularly the opioid crisis and food insecurity? I mean, particularly the opioid crisis. This is something that has really in certain times it has captured, the nation's attention, even if, materially not enough has been done to kind of address these concerns. What made you want to work in those areas, and what is some of the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, so I mean, just outright, I grew up in a relatively poor home to a single mom, working multiple jobs, and so that's been my direct lived experience. And despite all of my attempts to work as hard as I can through life, that's been basically my adult experience all the way into into adulthood. I've struggled to make ends meet, and I live in a community where that is right on the forefront. And so when me and my wife and family moved back to Alabama almost 4 years ago now, the first thing we thought was like, okay, like we didn't have job. I didn't have a job. I didn't know what we were going to do. But the first thing we wanted to do was like, we know what it's like to have food. And so we started there. The ministry we run called Jubilee House started a 24/7 kind of food pantry. And by that, it just means that anybody can come get food out of any time, and then anyone can come and put food in for their neighbors. And so it's really an alternative model to combating food insecurity. It's a way of inviting people outside of necessarily a connected to an organization like a typical food bank structure to just care for their neighbors. So it's both trying to get people fed, but it's also helping cultivate a different type of way of being, a different way of being in our community around these issues, because food banks are great. Just traditional food banks are amazing. We need more of them, but they're a Band-Aid on a larger issue that is a social and communal issue of failure to make sure that our neighbors are cared for. And so that's where that kind of rooted out of, was rooted in my own experience growing up, in a family that struggled. And so then it evolved into like a larger thing is around our work. It's like, okay, this is only going to be able to feed so many people at a time. And so beginning to think about resilient food systems and thinking about helping people grow their own food and get connected to the land in that way and be supported in that way. And so we started a community garden. We're in the third year of it now, and we're in the process of building an entire community farm. And of course, even that will not be enough, but it's a part of a larger social work of imagining how we can do things differently, especially when prices continue to go up and skyrocket. It makes a lot more sense to be able to go down to 4th Street, in Parrish and participate in that farm project and know that you're going to have tomatoes or you're going to have, eggs or whatever it is, because you are communally connected to that food system. And so it's a little bit of an alternative model there, but it comes from my deep rooted history of being connected and knowing the struggle of what it's like to not have enough food and to, not have the income or be able to manage the, that grocery bill. The opioid crisis is really even more close to home. For the majority of my life, my father was someone who struggled with, or someone with substance use disorder. And it ultimately is what took his life 2 years ago. And so I grew up in the midst of that. Multiple people in my family have been in active use basically my entire life, or in active recovery my entire life. And so I've seen the way this opioid crisis has radically impacted my own family, my friends, my community. It's really a wildfire that's still raging. And for the most part, our elected officials have done very little to respond to it. They've only continued to reinforce stigma. And, even now we have all this national opioid settlement monies coming into various municipalities, and Walker County is the epicenter of the state per capita for this. At one point in time, there was like 150 opiate pills per person in the entire county, which is insane, being prescribed. So that's legally being prescribed. And so this crisis is just eating our community alive. And it's something that's really close to my own heart because I've seen it rob my family of multiple people. And so, yeah, and the response to that just comes in the wake of our leaders not doing what I think they should be doing. And I'm not always right by any means, but people are dying every day in droves and overdosing because of this disease and because of a lack of care. We respond to the opioid crisis with more private prisons and more jail and more incarceration and all these things instead of responding to it with care. And so basically the work we've done here, we opened the state's first 24/7 Narcan vending machine, a free Narcan vending machine. And since then we've opened up 2 other locations in Walker County on nothing but a shoestring budget and grit. And since then have distributed over 7,000 doses of Narcan into Walker County in the last year. So that's 7,000 possibly 7,000 less hospital visits. That's possibly, a myriad of prevent, just interrupting the flow of violence that comes with death, or having the police have to show up to deal with these situations, or anything like that. And so, that's where it is. It's just basically deciding, like, a lot of the work that we've done here around food insecurity, around the opioid crisis and other things, is basically said, it's come from the question of, like, here's an issue, what can we do? We might not can solve it, but what can we do? And that's what we've given ourselves toward. Whatever we can put our hands, however we can put our hands to the plow, that's what we're trying to do.
You're, talking about, I want to get into some of the stuff that you would like specifically to advocate for in the legislature if the people of State Senate District 5 elect you. And one of the things that you talk about in your platform, and I think it's on your website, you can give out your website in your answer to this question, but you advocate for people over profits. What specifically do you mean when you talk about stuff like that? And what sort of things would you want to do, within that realm of putting people before profits in the legislature?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is we have an issue on the state level where our elected officials are bought and sold by lobbyists and big corporations. That's not just some wild accusation. If you can go and you can look up the contribution data for any of your elected officials, then you can see where their funding comes from. And so, of course, when you are paid for by lumber lobbyist or whatever it is, that's going to be where your economic interests are tied up in, and that's where your economic policies are going to be tied to. And so we have a lot of talk around, like, pro-business models or those kind of things. But if anything, when I look at Walker County, we know exactly, my even community of parish knows exactly what it's like for pro-business models to be on the forefront, because what it means is corporations come in, they extract a bunch of stuff, sometimes literal coal, lumber, whatever it is, labor, and then when they're done, they up and leave, and we're left in the wake with nothing. And so we have to, I think, prioritize the people over like literal profits for our elected officials. And because right now that's the thing, we know how, if you just look, even going back to like the Warrior Met Coal strikes of recent years, like the state sent the National Guard in because they're trying to preserve their own economic interest. KIV and some of these elected leaders are trying to preserve their own economic interest over the interest of the people, over the interest of workers. And so I fully believe we have to have a pro-worker position. And so for me, the policies, around protecting workers, there's some more grassroots type stuff that I'm working with on the forefront, like on community, like the development of kind of like community financial institutions that are kind of publicly controlled, that offer like micro lending and stuff to small businesses and worker cooperatives, with the prioritization of those that are unionized, micro loans for like local entrepreneurs and things like that, and then job credits to help bolster economic benefits that are particularly with businesses that are putting their workers first and putting their interest in the care for their workers on the forefront of what they're doing. And so that's a big part of it, is that. And then, of course, just trying to figure out ways that we can move forward to protect workers, because, again, I know what it's like to be in a situation, we're in a right to work state, which we talk about as if it's this really good thing. But what happens when the business decides to close up, or they decide they don't want you, or you're whatever it is, you're just gone. And then it literally leaves families uprooted in those things. And so I think all of our economic policies going forward, we have to have some way that prioritizes the needs of workers, because, again, we can bring these businesses in, we can have all this big economic development, we can bring these manufacturers in, we can open up new mines, we can do all those things. But if at the end of the day, the people who are working are left alienated from their families, if they're left alienated from having a decent life, their work is not being dignified, and profits are being put over that well-being. We end up with workers who are hurt. We end up with workers. It just feeds into some of these other crises we have. Like my father was a victim of the opioid crisis because he worked in conditions that beat his body down, versus a veteran, and then not having the care that he needed after that, and working in hard jobs that beat his body down, that pushed him to need those things. And so it's just a revolving cycle. And so if we don't prioritize workers, if we don't prioritize the people over profits, then we're just going to continue to see these fires and these issues increase, because there's no interruption to that flow that happens.
Yeah, that all sounds great, and I want to pull out something that may sound interesting for folks. You mentioned wanting to support local entrepreneurs, and obviously we're on the labor side, and our advocacy is more focused on the workers rather than the entrepreneurs. But there's obviously I don't think that you can argue. I don't think anybody would argue that there's not a place for people with an entrepreneurial spirit and who want to, go out and kind of do things on their own and build businesses that serve, the local community. And I definitely like the idea of fostering, homegrown talent and homegrown entrepreneurs rather than trying to bring in people from out of state to do this sort of stuff. I mean, I saw the other day, Huntsville, the city of Huntsville, had a grant to bring in people from out of state to be entrepreneurs, to build businesses in Alabama. And the grant was they would pay their rent for a whole year to live downtown. And it's like, there are for sure people in Huntsville who would build a business if you paid their rent for a year. I mean, that's crazy. Like, that was just so frustrating to see. And so, glad there's, an interest in fostering, economic development from folks locally.
From the bottom up.
Yeah, exactly. And the worker cooperative perspective. And that's such an important, encouraging through policy good business practices is really important, and talking about worker cooperatives and stuff like that. I'm thinking again of Warrior Met Coal, and the whole reason that started is because when Jim Walters Energy went bankrupt, it was purchased by like private equity vultures and BlackRock and stuff like that, so that they could strip it for parts and pull as much profit out of the state of Alabama as possible. I mean, the union estimated that from 2016, when Warrior Met was purchased and renamed, to 2021, when the strike started, that something like $2 or $3 billion with a B was stolen from that community that would have gone into those coal miners' paychecks and thus into the community if just the agreement with Jim Walters Energy had stayed status quo. But they gave up so much that it ended up being like $2 or $3 billion being sucked out of rural Alabama and going to private equity investors in New York and DC and Australia. And that's, what KIV ended up supporting when she opposed the strike. So sorry, I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but
no, I loved it. You can preach all day.
So, District 5 has been a Republican stronghold for a long time. Or, well, I mean, not for a long time. I mean, probably just since 2010. I don't know the history, but I would imagine that because I know the history of the state, I would imagine prior to 2010, it was a Democrat holding that seat. But obviously, for the last 15 years, almost certainly there's been a Republican there. So you're not a Republican. You won the Democratic nomination. This is a special election, and so if you win, you're going to have to run for election again in 2026. But for this special election, what is your strategy to, as a Democrat, engage Republican voters or to turn out typically non-voters who would lean towards maybe voting for a Democrat or not voting for a Republican? What is your strategy to get to a win in State Senate District 5?
Yeah, my best the way I understand it is that I have to read it in kind of the work we're already doing. Is that like with just an example, like the work we do with Jubilee House, there are people all across the political spectrum who are involved. There are people who are very much deeply red Republicans. There are people who are probably much further left than what a Democrat would even be comfortable with, who show up to distribute, Narcan, who show up to the community garden, who help put food in those fridges and work days and all those things. And the reason that's possible, I think, is because, for one, Alabama, the South in general, but Alabama, and even this context, even more specifically in District 5, is fertile ground for the work of community care. And it's fertile ground for it. And we might use, language like mutual aid or solidarity, all the things. It's really baked in. It just needs to be cultivated, right? And it gets cultivated by real relationships, because we get fed on both sides a particular political narratives about other people, depending on what letter they have beside their name or what party affiliation they have. But it's a lot harder for you to kind of distance yourself from someone because they're a Democrat or Republican if you know them, if you have conversations with them, if you get down to the real issues. And so for me, that's been my strategy so far is I'm trying to build real bridges with people through the relationships, through the work, and kind of bringing us back in locally, because there's all kinds of larger debates and things going on, between Republicans and Democrats and all these things that not that they don't have any bearing, but there are more pressing issues in District 5 that we can come together across party lines on because there are needs that we have that are not being met. And we continue to elect the same type of we continue to do the same thing, and nothing ever changes if nothing changes, right? And so the strategy for me is building those relationships. And even in the primary, I had a dozen people call me and say, this is the first time I've ever voted for a Democrat in my life, and I want you to know that. And I voted just because I wanted to make sure you're supported, because I see the work you've done in this community, and I know we disagree on X, Y, and Z, but you care about the things that are most important to the material needs of our community and what's going on, these issues. And because of that, I know we can work together. And so it's all about relationships, and that's hard work. To me, that's the only real strategy, because we could do all the big talking points or whatever and get off in the weeds of those things. But like the hard work of building relationships is where it happens, because then it allows us to cross that divide and realize we have mutual interest in making sure people are cared for. And current leadership, regardless of the letter beside their name, are failing to meet the needs of District 5. And that's my big point. I obviously ran as a Democrat. If I had, ran as a Republican or something, it would have been dead in the water before I ever even made the announcement, because Matt Woodworking, I guess I have no issues with him, but he's functionally this good old boy wants him to inherit this position. It's been uncontested since 2010, and that's what they were anticipating. And we deserve democracy in District 5. We deserve options, and we deserve politicians who are going to get elected based on their relationships and their commitments to the people, not to their party and not to profits and those kind of things. And so again, it just goes back to relationships, which is hard work. It is hard because we've been so kind of formed to write off someone based off whatever their political affiliation is. And there's going to be tons of people who vote based simply on that in this election. And that's unfortunate, but I believe that doing this work, we can lay the groundwork for something different and allow ourselves to not be so polarized when it comes to these issues, and realize that there's more at stake here than voting down a party line. And it's a matter of life and death in our communities. It's a matter of actually having the people, the vulnerable people, the working class people, the poor people in our communities supported, or continue to be neglected.
Absolutely. Well, that all sounds really good. You mentioned as we're wrapping up, have a couple more questions. You mentioned that you've kind of identified as one of your kind of chief antagonists, the good old boy system. Why? What do you mean when you say that, and why is that something that you want to challenge with your candidacy?
Well, I think, if you just look at the history of District 5, like we've had functionally a Republican appointed elected in the Senate seat since Greg Reed first won the election during that contested election. Ever since then, there's been no opposition. And partly that falls to a failure of the Democratic Party, and partly that falls to a failure of our community to realize that we deserve options no matter what. And so we have this system, Matt Woods, again, I have no issues with him. People in my life that I have major respect for have major respect for Matt Woods, but he is participating in a system that just, out the gate, he had $300,000 for a special election that on the math, for anyone asking, it was a unlosable election for him. And so we have all this huge financial backing going into these candidates that are keeping working class and poor people from even being able to campaign. Again, I don't want to harp on Matt Woods, because again, I don't have anything negative against him, but he's someone who's currently holding a position in the state, and he's getting to campaign functionally on taxpayer time and money, because he gave his own campaign a $50,000 loan, which is almost his entire state salary, right out the gate of this campaign, when he found out that it was going to be running in opposition. So we have a system here that keeps, and by good old boy system, I don't mean Republican, I don't mean Democrat, I mean it keeps working class and poor people from engaging in the in having pathways towards leadership, because we are outnumbered, we are out moneyed at every turn, and we're out supported by the systems that are already in place. And so that's a big thing for me, is challenging that system. I look around in my own community of Walker County, and I see how people in leadership have continued to abuse those positions over and over and over with no accountability on the local level. We see it on the state level. We see how the system continues to support leaders who don't have the economic interest in the material interest in the well-being of their people in mind. They have profits and party motives above everything else. And so my hope is to bring this back to the ground. I hope that if anything, I can bring this conversation back to the ground. We can get out of the culture war nonsense, and get to the ground and say, like, there are major barriers in place that prevent working class people from having an opportunity to actually be in leadership in this state and in our communities. And that's by design. It's absolutely by design. And so that's what I mean by the good old boy system. We have a system that supports and appoints who they want in those positions, that ensures they have the money and the backing, whether from corporations or lobbyists, to get in those positions, and to have a massive economic disparity between them and the people who actually live and work and struggle and fight in our communities. And that's a big thing too, going back, when I think about our leadership, there's definitely things. I even look at Gregory. There's things that he voted for that I think was the right decision or whatever. But I constantly go back to, this is with ministry and all these different things. Is that Gustavo Gutierrez said, "If you love the poor, tell me their names." And the problem is, and so what he's getting at, he's not just saying, name off a bunch of poor people. He's saying he wants to know, like, if you love the poor, that means you're actually in relationship with them, and you're actually struggling and living amongst them and with them and as them. And so for our elected politicians, we keep electing people who are so far removed from the actual needs of our communities, because this is the way the system's set up. We keep electing people who they don't know the names of the poor. They don't know the people in their communities who are struggling to pay their bills, the single moms who are working multiple jobs. They don't know the people who lost their job last week because their car broke down and they have no ability to do anything about it. They don't know the people that are working in a factory who lost a finger or something and just got, chucked to the side because they had no worker protections, because they live in a different world entirely. And they live in a system that is built for them and not for the majority of the people in this community. And so for me, challenging the good old boy system is challenging that. It's saying we need actual representation. Whether you're a Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter to me. You need actual working class and poor people need actual representation. And by and large across the state, we do not have it, because there's a system set up that prevents it from happening.
And so if you are elected, you'll only have one legislative session before you're running again. And so what do you hope to achieve in that legislative session? And how would you measure success?
This is one of those, this is a really hard question, but it's one that I think is very important, is because I can't make any promises to the people of District 5 other than the fact that I'm going to continue to fight for them tooth and nail, the same way that I fight for them every single day in Walker County. That's the best I know I can do, because again, if I am elected, I'm coming into a system that is still, even at that level, stacked against a lot of these ideas. But for me, success would be knowing that the people in my community said, "Ryan, we saw you fight for us, and we saw that you did everything you could." Even if things failed on the legislative side, to have the people in my community who are most impacted by these issues say, at the end of the day, you fought for us, that to me is a success. That is what I would measure it by what the people said, not by any of those other things, not by any other larger measures. It's about how the people seen the work that I did and what they came away with. And of course, I would love to see certain things happen in that first year. I think we have to have massive reform. We have to find ways to protect these things. So I have a lot of policy issues and things that I'm working for on my platform that I want to keep at the forefront. And those are the things that I'm going to be fighting for. Those are not the only things that are obviously crucial or that I find critical in our communities, but these are kind of the pillars of the things that I want to push for. And so for me, again, success looks like the people in my community, regardless of the Republican or Democrat or whoever, saying Ryan fought. At the end of the day, he gave everything he could to fight for these things and listen to what we needed and fought for our interests, whether they be economic or whatever. And so to me, that's what success is. Because again, you can say, well, we brought this much business into a community or whatever, but if people are still starving every week and people are still dying from overdose every week and people are all these things, then a new business, a new manufacturer, that's not a success to me.
Right.
But making sure that people's needs, the needle is moving forward even if it's very slightly, is what's important to me, because at the end of the day, we have to keep fighting, and we haven't been fighting. And that's the problem, is we've just accepted the status is for what it is. And so if we can continue to fight and we can galvanize more people to realize like we have to prioritize people over profits and people over party, then like that's a huge success in my mind.
Ryan Kaggel, Democratic nominee for State Senate District 5 in the special election. Thank you for talking to us. The invitation is open to Matt Woods if he would like to have the same amount of time. Welcome to talk to him. The website for Ryan Kaggel is kaggelforthepeople.com. Let me make sure I got that right. Yeah, kaggelforthepeople.com, C-A-G-L-E. We had a message in the chat from a Matthew who said, it's not red or blue, it's rich and poor. That is our view. Seems like that's Ryan's view as well. So Ryan Kaggel, Democratic nominee for State Senate District 5 in the state of Alabama. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, thank y'all so much, truly.
Yep. All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to be right back to get to Boss Watch, and then we'll go into overtime where we have an announcement. So, stay tuned. We'll be right back. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We have a phone number, 844-899-TVLR. You can leave us a voicemail anytime. We'll open the phones at 11 a.m. Central Time, 12 noon Eastern Time, if you're listening to us over there. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, that phone number is 844-899-TVLR. Let's get to Boss Watch. Boss Watch is a segment that we do every week where we take a look at what bosses are up to, particularly, but not exclusively, in the southern United States, how they are endangering workers, breaking the law, and such. We have a we have a report from AL.com from Patrick Darrington. He's reporting on a jury awarding a $10 million verdict to a woman who was severely injured while she was a teenager working at a Jefferson County business in 2019. The jury settled in favor of Destiny Longs, who was 17 at the time the injury occurred. According to the lawsuit, which was filed on her behalf by her mother, Denisha Longs, the teen was working at a facility owned and operated by co-defendants Comfort Systems USA and H&M Mechanical Incorporated. Both companies conduct business and commercial heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. Longs was employed through In Time Staffing LLC, which was also named as a co-defendant. These staffing agencies are terrible, terrible, terrible entities. On July 8th, 2019, Longs was instructed by a supervisor, Roy Lewis, to work on a coil line machine, which is designed to fabricate ductwork. The lawsuit alleges that Longs was instructed to work on the dangerous machine without proper protective equipment, in violation of Alabama child labor laws. While working on the machine, minor plaintiff Destiny Longs' arms were caused to be pulled into the rollers and to wrap around. Her arms were wrapped around the machinery, pinning her into the machine and causing her immediate injury and intense, prolonged pain, the complaint reads. Minor plaintiff Destiny Longs was not freed from the machinery until Birmingham Fire and Rescue arrived and were able to cut and disassemble the machine. As part of the lawsuit, Longs sought to have the defendants pay her workers' compensation benefits and penalties for her injuries under the Alabama Workers' Compensation Act. The jury made the determination to award Longs $10 million in compensatory damages on April 11th. You can read the full story on AL.com. Love to see that. You do not often see such big payouts for worker injuries, so really happy for those folks. Like I've been saying so far under the Trump administration, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration is not being as public with its investigations. Last week, they did conclude a few investigations, but those were begun under the Biden administration. Even so, workers are still dying on the job, obviously, typically 100 workers every week in the United States. So even though OSHA is even more hamstrung than before, there is sometimes a small news story whenever somebody dies at work, because it is such a terrible thing to happen in a community. On the Confined Space newsletter set up by Jordan Barra, a former OSHA official, they compile as many news stories on worker deaths as they can find every week. In addition to this newsletter, the weekly Toll, they regularly host commentary and analysis pieces about labor and workplace safety. This week, they found 37 stories on worker deaths, including 20 from the South. A few lowlights: in Homewood, Alabama, a landscape worker was killed when his riding lawnmower flipped on top of him in a median off Interstate 65. The accident occurred in the grass median between I-65 northbound and the Oxmoor Road exit. Homewood police said the victim, whose identity has not been released, worked for a private landscaping crew that was hired by the city of Homewood to clean up the area. The portion that was being cut was on the state right-of-way. Witnesses told the police the victim was attempting to drive the lawnmower up the embankment when it overturned. Homewood fire medics pronounced him dead at the scene. In Huntington, Tennessee, the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency reports that a lineman with the Carroll County Electric Department died while working as strong storms hit the area. Our hearts are with the family and friends of Chance Carlton, who lost his life while working during the recent storms, the agency said. Carroll County Mayor Joseph Butler said he was heartbroken about the lineman's death. We thank the Tennessee Valley Authority, the local power companies, and line workers across the state for their continued work to keep power on for Tennesseans. In Port St. Lucie, Florida, a 19-year-old died after being run over by heavy construction equipment. The Port St. Lucie Police Department said that on Tuesday, a large palm tree was being delivered and installed in a yard. According to officials, the palm tree was attached to the skid steer's forks, and Elias Lopez Macareo of Palm City was walking alongside it as the machine was moving. They said that witnesses saw Macario, trip and fall in front of the skid steer, a heavy construction equipment often used for digging. The operator, who was unaware of the incident, accidentally ran over him. In Union Busters, this segment of Boss Watch Union Busters, covering national updates, is sponsored by Labor Lab. Labor Lab is an employer watchdog organization. They are committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by coming through reports that Union Busters are required to file with the Department of Labor. Here are the new filings from this week. Volkswagen in Virginia hired Road Warrior Productions for $3,800 a day. Workers lost the union election 62 to 81. And the Union Busters filed their filings after the election. So workers did not know who was talking to them or how much they were being paid. GE Renewable Energy in New York hired Jose Agras for $187 an hour. Sutter Amador Hospital in California hired Healthcare Labor Solutions. Workers lost the union election 61 to 100. This union buster also filed after the election. In 2024, Healthcare Labor Solutions made $3.2 million from employers and paid subcontractors $1.8 million. Dagcor Aluminum in Kentucky hired National Labor Relations advocates for $3,000 a day and $375 an hour off-site. Workers lost the union election 30 to 59. The Union Busters filed after the election. Flowers Baking Company of Oxford in Pennsylvania hired Logic Labor Relations for $375 an hour. Sherwin-Williams in Ohio hired Labor Information Services for $400 a day. Despite that, workers still won the union election 40 to 32. The Union Busters filed after the election was over. Labor Information Services states that many of their consultants are former union organizers and speak multiple languages, including Spanish, Tagalog, French, Portuguese, Vietnamese, and Chinese dialects. In addition, the following filings were amended. Alfred Lacey amended his filing to change the employer name from Amazon to a specific Amazon location, Amazon DDE9. Adam, do we have a couple of plugs before we wrap up here on the radio?
Yeah, we do have a couple of plugs. I wanted to mention that on the 29th of April, so that's coming up on April 29th at 6 p.m., I will be doing a Unions 101 webinar. Really excited about this. I'm going to be partnering with Jennifer Shearer from the Economic Policy Institute. She has a great Unions 101 presentation. So I'm doing this with Alabama Arise. You can go to alarise.org to stay tuned on that. So yeah, really looking forward to that. It's open to the general public, whether you're a union member already and you just want to kind of like brush up on some things maybe, or if you're a worker and you're curious about unions, you want to learn more. Or maybe you hate unions. Maybe you've been told really terrible things about unions and you'd like to just hear the other side and hear a different perspective. Really encourage folks to check that out. It's a good opportunity to share with community allies and folks who are maybe supportive but aren't really sure why or what it all means, because the big focus will be explaining what today's unions are, who today's union members are, and how policy interacts with unions and why all of this really matters to everyday people. So we'll talk more about that in overtime, but on that particular subject of, why the labor movement is relevant to everybody, even you who's listening. And also want to mention Labor Notes, as always, has some great events going on. They've got their Steering Green Transitions talk on April 23rd coming up at 7 p.m. They also have this month's Stewards Workshop is Dealing with Difficult Supervisors. Definitely a relevant training for a lot of stewards. That's going to keep you busy if you have a difficult supervisor as a steward. So this is for stewards and elected officers, so it's a limited capacity workshop, but do want to put that out there for folks. And they have a workshop on April 30th called Winning a Strong Contract, Parts 1 and 2. So a 2-part workshop. It starts April 30th. Second part's May 7th on winning a strong contract. So if you're heading to the negotiations table soon, or maybe you just negotiated a contract but you want to go ahead and get started planning for the next one, good time to check out that workshop. And May 6th they have What to Do When Your Union Breaks Your Heart. They do that usually every month, and I always recommend that class. So that's all we have. labornotes.org/events. Check them out.
That's going to be it for us on the radio today. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Find us on Facebook and YouTube if you want to see the second half of the program. We really appreciate your time. You can call in at 844-899-TVLR. The phone is open now, so we will take calls as overtime starts. If you don't follow us online, though, we'll see you next week. All right, folks, that is it for us on the radio. We're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody's time, everybody hanging out. We're going to go ahead and take a break. Like I said, 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857 is the phone number. We got lots coming up. We have like I said, we do have an announcement that we'll make at the top of overtime. Joe in the Facebook chat said, "Let me guess, Adam is going to run against Dale Strong."
No.
You didn't want to. I thought we were.
I should have kept him in suspense, but come on, no one believes that. No one really believes that. I will not be challenging Dale Strong. I'm sure he's very grateful that I'm not going to do that.
You
know what? His wife shared one of our videos one time when Dale Strong ran against Casey Wardynski in the Republican primary. Dale Strong's wife showed our video, or shared our Facebook, our YouTube link, where we trashed Colonel Casey Wardynski.
So you know what? He may very well.
He may know.
I'm almost positive he knows of us. I mean, that would be really weird if he didn't know of us. I mean, I'm not saying that to be like, we've been on the radio in his district for on the largest news talk station in his district for 5 years. That would be bizarre if he didn't know of us. But
sure.
What I was gonna say was that he might. Maybe he owes his primary victory to that video that you made.
Maybe
about Wardynski. And
maybe.
So, maybe he needs to come.
We'll take credit for it. We'll take credit for. I guess I say that. I don't know that we want to take credit for anything associated with him, but yeah.
I'm just saying he needs to come and ask for favors.
Yeah, he should come on the show. And we I know he's not interested in town halls or like much public engagement these days, but Dale Strong, if you're listening, or if your wife is listening.
That would be so funny if like not only did she find that Wardynski video and she shared it, but she is like a regular listener and she loves our program. That would be super funny.
It is always interesting to hear some of the people out in the field that we talk to that do listen to this show, and sometimes it is surprising, some of the people who listen. A lot of people hate listen. That's fine. If you're listening right now because you hate everything we're talking about and you hate what we stand for, we appreciate your engagement. We hope you'll keep tuning in and maybe something will stick, but yeah, Congressman Strong, you are your wife, anyone who's listening, you are welcome on the program. We have some questions. We have some questions for you about what's going on in D.C., especially when it comes to working people here in Alabama. So, yeah, hit us up, Congressman. You're welcome on the show.
Let's go to break.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller, and we appreciate you spending some time with us wherever that is, whether it's on the radio, on Facebook, on YouTube, as a podcast, or now on Means TV. If you'd like to call in, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can call in while we are live on Saturday mornings or leave a voicemail at any time throughout the week. We appreciate you tuning in. And that is the announcement that we are now on Means TV. You can go to means.tv. And we're going to have a small back catalog of all of our programs from 2025. All of the overtime sections of the program from 2025 will be on Means TV beginning on Monday. So we are incredibly excited. Means TV is a really cool project, like a left-wing Netflix sort of thing. Our participation in Means TV means that we are also cooperative members of Means TV. Means TV is a cooperative. It's not just owned by capitalists and stuff like that. So everybody that participates is also a member of it. So it's really cool. It's a really cool project, and we're really excited to be a part of it. Again, beginning on Monday, this segment will be on means.tv along with the rest of the overtime segments from 2025. So really exciting stuff, and I appreciate the folks at Means TV for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Means TV. I'm a longtime subscriber. I'm a regular listener of Means Morning News. I'm a big fan of Sam Sachs and the work he does at that program. It is a great, daily news kind of program, usually in the 15 to 20-ish minute range, and a good highlight of what's going on, but with a particular pro-worker bent. And so really appreciate that, and really appreciate this opportunity to engage with more folks and different people. And so welcome. If you're coming from Means TV, we appreciate you tuning in.
Absolutely. We had a couple of comments that I want to react to from our Boss Watch segment. Pinkerbell saying that's horrifying. Matt, holy crap. Benjo says way too young for this to happen to these people. Insanity. And Pinkerbell says the thought of people spending their last moments on this earth making money for corporations that will replace them before they're even cold is radicalizing AF. Before you even consider the accidents and injuries. And yeah, that's really exactly the point of the Boss Watch segment, right? Because it is just so crazy, because when you realize how much this happens and how preventable it is. I mean, one of the leading causes of death, of workplace deaths, are falls. We know how to prevent falls. It's by we know how to prevent falls that result in death and injury. It's by wearing fall protection. Another one of the leading causes is trench collapses. I mean, there are very strict, very, well-known regulations around trenches and working at heights. And just to save a few bucks, corporations don't do them. And literally 100 people every day are killed on the job. 6,000 people suffer every single week from injury and illness on the job, and thousands die from occupational injuries every week. I mean, it is just a ridiculous amount of death and sickness that happens at work. And so, Boss Watch, we want to try to highlight some of that, and also recognize, help people recognize that, unfortunately, the apparatus of the state is not powerful enough to protect you by and large, especially now, as the Trump administration is taking a chainsaw to all of the worker protection agencies. The thing that is going to protect you is you and your coworkers organizing, getting a union contract with a worker safety committee so you don't have to rely on OSHA or the Wage and Hour Division of the Department of Labor, stuff like that. So, really important segment.
Yeah, and just to add a fine point to that, it would take the OSHA, the Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration, 185 years to inspect every workplace just once. And Congress only allows the agency to spend less than $4 protecting each worker it's responsible for. So absolutely, we know for a fact that union workplaces are safer. And it makes sense because when workers have a voice on the job, they're able to resolve safety issues, prevent safety issues, increase training, all the sorts of things that make for safer workplaces. And want to note that April 28th is Workers' Memorial Day. So if you're not familiar with that, that is a good day to, reflect and just remember all the lives who are lost at work, the preventable lives that are lost and harmed, because that is an ongoing, silent tragedy in this country, are the people who are losing their lives and their limbs and their health at work or because of work. And so April 28th is Workers' Memorial Day. AFL-CIO encourages unions, labor council, state federations, other bodies to do something, around that day, to organize around that day, to, if nothing else, just share these stories and have conversations with people and let people know what's going on. I know I've written an article that I'm hoping to get out on Workers' Memorial Day, for the general public, just because I think a lot of times we don't hear about these issues. And unless it's, especially if you don't work in a workplace that is considered dangerous, quote unquote, right? Like if you're in a more white collar professional environment, and you've never experienced some of the more dangerous workplaces, you may not be aware. That said, even in office environments, there are all sorts of hazards that you deal with. I just recently had a conversation with someone who was talking about mold and how mold contamination was just having such a detrimental effect on a workplace and on workers in the workplace. And this was, a white collar environment, right? So, don't think that you're immune to these issues as well. Workplace safety is important for everyone. And like you said, it's workers coming together, building unions. That's how we can try to keep each other safe.
I told Bob that we're running a little bit late because I do want to get to this, and especially since we don't have any calls on the line, because it's an important segment, and I think it'll be a good intro for the Means TV audience. This is something that we were going to be doing today anyway, and it just so happened to fall at a good time. But and we talked a little bit about it actually in our explanation of another segment of the show, Boss Watch. But our program really centers unions and labor. And so there are a lot of people out there that may kind of feel like, well, why do unions matter? Why are unions a uniquely important institution for the project of building an America, building a country, building a world that better respects normal people? Like, why should I care about unions more than I care about the Sierra Club, or more than I care about, this or that or the other organization? Why, I believe, at least I'll speak for me, that unions really are a uniquely important institution for building a better society. I think that other institutions are important. I'm not saying they're not, but I really do believe that unions are uniquely important. And so, Adam, talk to, why do you put so much importance on unions? And, why do you think that unions matter?
Right. So, to build off what you just said, I think that unions are a tool. They are perhaps the most powerful tool that we as working people, and we are the majority, the vast majority of people in this country, in the South, across the world. We are working class people, right? And, unions are that powerful tool that we have to actually build power and wield power for ourselves, to make things better for ourselves and our families and our communities. So we talk a lot about unions and the labor movement on this show. And, we do try to explain this throughout our programming and throughout our segments. We try to connect it for regular folks, quote unquote, for people who are outside the labor movement. So we try to explain how it's relevant to the masses. But we did want to spend a few minutes this morning being very intentional in discussing how and why the labor movement, and in particular the Southern labor movement, is relevant to all of you. Yes, even you who's listening, who may not be sure why. So maybe you're a retiree, maybe you're a student, maybe you're even a small business owner, or maybe you're just one of the 90+% of workers who is not currently in a union. Maybe you're tuning in from outside the South, and we know that we have online listeners from outside the South, and we welcome all of you on Means TV. Maybe you're passionate about environmental justice, racial justice, gender justice, or other issues, and you're not really sure how labor unions really fit together with that. So we wanted to spend some time on why organized labor in the South is a subject that's worth paying attention to. And, I'm really proud to talk about this because it's close to my heart, and it's something that's building real power for working people right here in the South. And I did not grow up in a union household. I was not raised to be pro-union, the contrary, if anything. And I came to unions a little bit later in my political development. I was reading history, and history really opened my eyes. And so was into politics and history and the social sciences for years before I ever actually engaged with a union. But it was when I started teaching that I got my first exposure. And I started teaching in 2012, the same year the Chicago Teachers Union went on their historic strike for the school Chicago students deserved. And that helped me connect the dots between my politics and all these, policies that I believed and ideas that I had about how we could have a better, more just, democratic world and future. That strike really helped me see how workplace organizing and then building coalitions in the community could really be that engine of change, and it could push things forward, to actually make a real material difference in people's lives. And here in the South, especially certain parts of the South, union can feel like a dirty word. And there are people who want to scare you off of unions because they're scared of you having power. And they should be. Because when workers stand together, black and white, young and old, gay and straight, union, not yet union, we can win the kind of South that's actually worth living for all of us, not just the bosses and the billionaires. So if you're a non-union worker, you're a small business owner, why should you care about the labor movement? The reality is that when unions are strong, wages go up, right? Even for folks who aren't in a union yet, right? We saw this with the UAW and their successful strike against the Big Three. All the other auto manufacturers started raising their wages as well. They called it the UAW bump. And so you have improvement in wages, you have improvement in healthcare, you have improvement in safety, safer workplaces. And when people have a little bit more money in their pocket, when they have a little bit more comfort, they're able to spend some of that money right at home, right? At the diner, the corner store, the barbershop, buy clothes for their children, take their family out to eat, all that kind of thing. So it really is about growing from the bottom up, and more of the wealth that is created by the workers, right? Because that is who is creating this wealth, that's generating these profits. It's the labor of the workers, right? So unions are a tool for us to get more of that back into our pockets, more of the wealth that we create, right? So strong unions raise wages, not just for their members, but across entire industries and regions. They set higher standards that even non-union employers have to try to compete with. And when working people have more money in their pockets, they spend it locally. That fuels small businesses and community development, right? So I think, small businesses don't have to fear unions, because the real unfair competition they face is from the huge corporations that exploit workers and dodge taxes and dodge regulations, right? So the more we have strong labor standards, that allows ethical businesses to thrive without being undercut by this race to the bottom among employers. A more unionized workforce stabilizes the economy, it reduces turnover in the workplace, it improves the consumer spending, so that boosts the local business environment. Now, me personally, that doesn't really resonate with me. I'll be honest, because I'm not a small business owner. But were I one, I would like to know that people in the neighborhood or the community or the city or region that made up my customers, I would like to know that they were able to engage in their family lives and take their family out to spend money at my store, right? So, but most significantly, I think, on this, is that the decline of unions is directly linked to rising inequality. Right? You can go and you can Google the graph online, right, that tracks inequality and union membership. And as union membership has plummeted, wealth has concentrated at the top. And so now we have this powerful oligarchy, right, with less than 10% or so of workers in a union. And that is at the root of basically every crisis that we're facing. So if inequality is our crisis and unions are a tool to fix that crisis, that's why it's important, right? That's why it's important that we grow unions. And we can't just grow a little bit. We have to grow in a massive, massive way. We have to have an upsurge like we last saw in the 1930s or in the 1960s. That's the kind of massive people power that we need. And, it does connect to broader fights for justice, like racial equality, gender equality. So if you look at who's making the country run, it's working class people. And a whole lot of them are women and people of color and immigrants, right? The working class is just by definition the most diverse class of people. The labor movement, when it's doing what it's supposed to do, gives folks a voice on the job, a seat at the table. And, it's no accident that Dr. King died supporting striking sanitation workers in Memphis. The struggle for labor rights and civil rights has always been linked, and that's a fight that's still going on today. Historically and today, unions are among the only institutions fighting for equal pay, anti-discrimination policies, racial justice on the job. Unions have lifted generations of Black workers into better lifestyles, especially in the South, where economic apartheid persists. A stronger labor movement helps close the wage gap for women and protects against retaliation for speaking out on workplace harassment. Every major progressive victory in U.S. history, Social Security, civil rights, workplace safety, the weekend, it was built on the back of a strong labor movement. So today's fights for healthcare, for climate justice, for public education, for democratic rights, it needs organized people power, which is something that unions specialize in when we are operating the way we can and the way we should. So by rebuilding the Southern labor movement, we can build a foundation for transformational change across this country, because the South for too long has been a refuge for the worst practices of employers, right? The South has worse working conditions, lower wages, worse public services and investment, right? So the corporations love to come to the South, and Southern politicians love to welcome them and tout the pro-business environment and economic development. But this economic development model is rooted in lower wages and higher exploitation, anti-union laws, right? Lack of regulation, lack of taxes. Hell, they may give you tax money to come here, right? So that's the kind of Southern economic model that we're dealing with. And I know I've heard Brother Jacob over here talk about Alabama being, one of the last stops to Mexico, right? And so we've seen corporations relocate from union stronghold states in the north or out west or in the Midwest. We've seen them relocate to the South, hoping to flee union power. So that's why it's so important that we rebuild the labor movement, especially here in the South. That is critical to saving this country, frankly. And so, some people say that the South is not friendly to unions, but I think that's BS, right? Our bosses and politicians are not friendly to unions. But we, the people, we're not anti-union. We've just been kept from unions. For generations, the bosses and the politicians they bankroll have done everything they can to divide us and keep us quiet. But I think that tide is turning. You look at what's happening in Chattanooga with Volkswagen and the huge win there with the United Auto Workers. You look at the growth of Starbucks Workers United across the state, across the South, right? You look at these other campaigns and you can see that working people do have backbone. Working people are willing to organize. We just need the space and the support to organize. And, we're going to do it whether folks like it or not. And we have a huge, huge heritage here in Alabama specifically that a lot of folks outside the South and a lot of folks inside Alabama don't know, which is at one time, 1 in 4 Alabamians belonged to a labor union, right? Walker County, which we talked about earlier in the show, that's where Ryan Kaggel is from and where he's running for office. Walker County used to be the most unionized county in the country, right? We had interracial coal miner organizing with the UMWA. We had the civil rights movement, in the 50s and 60s. So we have a strong, strong heritage here in Alabama of working people coming together, even in difficult situations, even when they try to divide us. We have a legacy of coming together, fighting for better, building power for ourselves. And that's the kind of legacy and heritage that we have to reclaim. I see a lot of people who look like me who talk about Southern heritage and Alabama heritage, and that's usually not what they mean. But we have to reclaim this kind of heritage of worker struggle, of interracial people power, and we have to let folks know that unions are just as Alabama as football and sweet tea and biscuits, right? No matter what our governor says, no matter what some of the politicians or the Business Council of Alabama or other interests say. So, ultimately, if we don't build worker power, the bosses will keep setting the rules. We'll keep slipping further into poverty while a handful of folks get richer and richer. But if we organize, if we get smart, if we're bold about it, and we fight like hell for each other, we can transform the South. And that's not just good for us. That's good for the whole country. It's good for the whole world. Because if we can win here, we can win anywhere. And I think we can do it.
Yep. And I want to tack on, just one. I mean, that was a really, really great, I think, summary of why unions matter. But I want to tack on one more thing, and that I think there's a belief, either implicit or explicit, among some people that if an institution isn't perfect, then I shouldn't join it.
Right.
Or if an institution doesn't win every fight, then it's not effective.
Right.
And that we got a comment to that effect on our Facebook chat. James asked, how did the strike with Warrior Met work out for the UMWA? Still don't have a contract yet. Why? I know you see this comment. Don't skip it. And I don't honestly even know exactly how that is relevant to what we're talking about, right? I mean, the fact
you win
that,
some, you lose some.
Exactly. You win some, you lose some. And I don't think that anybody, if you talk to them and you ask them, do you think that the Warrior Met situation was a win for the union or not? I don't think anybody is going to feel like that was a win. But what are we to do with that information? Unions lose sometimes. And the fact that we win, the fact that unions win as much as we do, when everything in this country is basically set up against us, when the courts are set up to stop picketing like they were in Alabama. In Alabama during the Warrior Mat strike, picketing, just being there on the side of the road with a sign, was criminalized for like 40% of the strike. You couldn't even hold a sign on the side of the road calling a scab in the state of Alabama for a large portion of that strike. The laws are against us. The companies have all the money. The companies have the politicians. They have the state police on their side. And yet, unions still win as much as they do. And yet, union workers make more money than non-union workers. And yet, union workers are more likely to have health care than non-union workers. And yet, union workers are safer on the job than non-union workers, right? So, like, sometimes unions are going to make mistakes. Sometimes unions are there's going to even be problems with leadership. I mean, James later on said when you have crooked people running the union, you're not getting nothing. And I've not seen anything at all to suggest that the leadership of the UMWA in Alabama is crooked or corrupt or anything like that. I've never seen anything like that. And so I don't know if that was just in a colloquial sense or something, but I mean, I do know that the leadership of the UMWA in Alabama spent a lot of time and really ran themselves ragged trying to support this strike. And it was a very taxing thing on the leadership and obviously on the miners. And so, the union lost, right? But that doesn't mean that unions are not good. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't still be a part of the UMWA if you work in a coal mine in Alabama. I mean, just think about how much worse it would be if most mines in Alabama are still unionized. Think about how much worse it would be if most of them were not. Mm-hmm. There is no world in which you are better off if you don't have a union. Even in a place after a union loses. I mean, that's just, it doesn't make any sense. And I talked to, during the Warrior Met strike, actually, I talked to miners who came from West Virginia and came from Kentucky, where the mines have been effectively eradicated, or where the unions have been effectively eradicated from the mines. And they talked about, even at Warrior Met, even under the degraded contract under Warrior Met, the degraded contract, it was much better under Jim Walters. Even under that set of circumstances, it was so much better than when they were working in the mines in West Virginia and Kentucky, right? And so, look, like, they lost.
Right.
But unions are still good, and you should still be a part of a union, and you should still be part of the UMWA.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are human institutions,
right?
So they're as flawed as the humans inside them and the humans leading them. On this show, we have not been shy to critique the labor movement or its institutions or its leaders. We've, pissed off plenty of people on plenty of sides and plenty of organizations over the years because of that, Mm-hmm. And so I think it's perfectly okay. And in fact, a good thing when we have disagreement and debate and democracy when it comes to our unions, about the direction, the strategy, the tactics, the vision, that we're building towards. I think that's all healthy, and we should have those kind of discussions and dialogue. But yeah, I think it is a mistake to have a bad experience or to run into a bad union, quote unquote, and just write off the tool, right? Like the tool itself, just write it off completely. As if it's no longer applicable, relevant, right? There are some lousy union folks out there, right, who are in office and probably shouldn't be. That's a reality in any institution, whether it's a church, whether it's a political institution, government institution, your alumni society at your college, whatever it may be. Any organization, right, that is a human organization is going to sometimes have some people in it that aren't doing right. That's just the reality. Yep. And so democracy is how we guard against that. That's how we come together. We have opposing ideas and opposing perspectives, and we wrestle with that, and we move forward in a better way. And I think democratic accountability is really how you prevent some of those issues because corruption, of course, is something that has happened in unions, right? We're not shy about admitting that. That's a reality. Just like any institution. But that's where it's up to the rank and file membership and our engagement to really hold everybody accountable in the process, including ourselves, to make sure that we are pushing forward for what's best for the workers, what's best for the membership, what's best for, the folks who are really producing the wealth and who are taking the risk. And so, the labor movement, it is essential. If you believe in dignity, if you believe in fairness, if you believe in justice, the only way we get those things is with a strong, strong labor movement that has to be better, bigger, bolder than the one we have now. And that's going to take a lot of people involved, a lot of activity from a lot of everyday folks stepping up, to make change however they can to make a difference.
Ben Joe in the chat said, you can vote and fix a union, but try to vote to fix your boss. Yeah, that's a good way to wrap it up. Bob Funk has been in the Zoom for a while
sorry, Bob,
now.
that we've kept you waiting.
Really appreciate your
we've
patience.
Been on one.
Been on one, but wanted to get through that. So Bob Funk is the executive director of Labor Lab. Bob Funk, also haver of a very cool name. Bob, welcome to the program. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me, brothers. Obviously a big fan of the show, and really glad to come on after the last segment, because I think it's incredibly important, and that last comment is so spot on. I mean, the difference between your employer or most other institutions is that workers can actually rectify a situation. They actually have a voice. Going back to the win-lose analogy, but just because unions lose every once in a while doesn't mean you shouldn't play ball. And unions actually let you onto the field instead of just sitting in the stands.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah,
that's exactly right, Bob. So really appreciate your time. Like I said, you're executive director of Labor Lab. Labor Lab has been sponsoring the Valley Labor Report for a while now, and we talk about what Labor Lab is and what Labor Lab does every time. But just remind folks, and with a little bit more, a little bit more fidelity about the organization, the mission, and how it got started.
Yeah, absolutely. We started Labor Lab kind of in the depths of the pandemic. Obviously, there was a lot of interest and continues to be, and there has always been a lot of interest in unionizing your workplace. Honestly, we originally started simply to educate more workers on their rights, specifically their rights to unionize under the Constitution, federal law, and international law. And the reason we did that is we'd seen enough polling that showed that a striking amount, almost half of Americans think that they don't have the right to be in a union. So we saw that as a huge problem. And so we launched the effort mainly to make the process a little more understandable, make it clear where the lines were for employers, and quickly became the top resource around the right to unionize and how to execute those rights. But at the same time, that we all know the facts. 70% of Americans support unions. Half of Americans want to be in a union, but union density continues to drop, and that's because of unchecked union busting. Everyone's familiar with what's happening at Amazon and Starbucks, but the fact of the matter is that we expose hundreds of companies every year for union busting and trying to suppress the right of workers to collectively bargain. And as you said in your last segment, unions truly are the path. If you care about healthcare, if you care about a stable community, stable families, unions are the pathway, but there's so much employer resistance in the way. And we figured, hey, 70% of Americans think that workers should be allowed to freely organize and think that that's a good idea. It's time to start calling out those employers that are opposed to their workers having a voice in the workplace. So we started leveraging a number of tools that have been underutilized by the labor movement to identify and expose companies in literally every state that are suppressing the voice of workers, keeping them down, keeping their families paycheck to paycheck, so that we could create some public resistance to it. That's why it's so great that the Valley Labor Report is constantly bringing attention and naming and shaming the companies that do this. Additionally, we under federal law, workers and the public are entitled to certain information regarding their employers and how much their employers are spending to suppress organizing efforts. Unfortunately, those tools are very difficult and complicated to access, so we wanted to streamline the process to make sure that when workers are organized, they actually have access to the information that they are entitled to under the law. And the result has been a number of wins for workers, simply because information is power. I mean, it's a powerful thing when a worker making $15 an hour finds out that their employer is spending $500 an hour for some consultant to come in and give some PowerPoints and follow workers around the workplace, do ride-alongs, and harass them on the shop floor.
Yes. Yeah, that's really important. And they're supposed to, and a lot of times they do, but they do it late, and I want you to talk to us about that. But they're supposed to file with the Department of Labor when they hire these union busters. Talk to us about that. What does that process look like, and why is it that so often that information comes too little too late? I mean, every single new filing this week, I think it was every single one. Let me look and see. Yeah, filed after tally, filed after tally, filed after tally, fired after tally. Yeah, filed after tally. Yeah, every single one where there was a union election, the union busters did not file until after the election was over. And so what are these regulations, and how do they work? And how are they able to get away with seemingly not abiding by them?
That's a really good question, and that's the question that at Labor Lab we're constantly demanding answers for. Just to take a step back, most people in the labor movement are familiar with the National Labor Relations Act, and that is the cornerstone labor law in this country. There was additional legislation that plays an incredibly important role for workers' rights, accountability, et cetera. It's the Labor Management Relations and Disclosure Act. And what most people are familiar with that act is that it created a whole bunch of transparency rules for unions themselves, which honestly, I think anyone that's listening to the show, I think both of you brothers would agree with this, that union transparency is a good thing. We need to make sure that union members know how their dues are being spent. The part of the law that has been intentionally neglected since the law was passed in the 1950s is the fact that it put the same regulations and rules on companies and labor relations consultants, and let's just call them what they are, union busters, put the same rules on them. In fact, Congress was even more specific when it came to the consultant class and the employer class. So that's why it's so striking that for so long, the federal government has neglected its mandate to hold these union busters accountable. So what this looks like is, under the law, Congress said, when there's a union election, workers are entitled to have a transparent understanding of what their employers are doing, especially what kind of spending they're initiating to bring down the union drive. In fact, it was so important that they said, this isn't an annual filing. You have to do it within 30 days of being hired, so that workers, while they're organizing, have a clear idea of who is talking to them, why they're talking to them, and what their biases are. Unfortunately, the Department of Labor, since the law was enacted, has almost solely focused on union compliance, while letting the Chamber of Commerce's clients off the hook. And let me give you an example. Right now, unions have an annual financial disclosure that they're supposed to make. Roughly 90% of unions comply with the law. The other 10% is usually a small local. Maybe they have a new secretary treasurer on board. The Department of Labor reaches out to them and says, we don't have your disclosures. And then they enroll in a voluntary compliance program. So at the end of the day, you almost have 100% compliance. Now, let me show you the other side. As you pointed out, Jacob, at the top, almost all of the disclosures that came in this week were late. We did a groundbreaking analysis a couple of years ago and found that compliance on the corporate side with disclosure laws was at 18%, like literally the inverse of how unions comply with the law. So we spent a lot of time, especially during the previous administration, trying to bring attention to this. So much attention to it that they actually had an Office of Inspector General audit of the Department of Labor, which found that the Department of Labor is not meeting its mandate to protect the right to unionize. And anyone can go and read that report. It's pretty damning. I will say that the previous administration was working to initiate a lot of the recommendations in there, including basically putting a team together that is solely going after non-complying corporations and consultants. And the fact of the matter is we know who all these people are. There are 20,000 unions in the country. We're talking about 150 consultants. This should be really easy for the Department of Labor to bring the hammer down and say, you guys need to get these disclosures in ASAP, because workers are entitled to know who the hell you are. And I'll give you another example. A lot of times these union busting consultants come in, refuse to actually give their name. We have numerous examples of that. Say, that's not important. You don't need to know who I am. Or they pretend, or at least insinuate, that they are from the NLRB itself and they are there to answer their questions about the election process. That is horrifying. And the problem is, if these disclosures come in after the fact, workers are going to cast their ballots without the information that Congress said that they are entitled to. Obviously, I don't think that there should be any employer interference in union elections, but this is the bare minimum of holding corporations and their union busting consultants accountable during union elections. And it makes a huge impact, guys. I love talking about UAW in Chattanooga. Chattanooga is my second home, and what happened there is incredible. And they kept organizing and organizing until basically VW said, okay, we're not going to, bring in these union busting consultants. But almost at the same time, and they won their election, right? And then almost at the same time, you have Mercedes in Alabama, where they hired an army of union busting consultants, and the result was different. We see this statistically. It makes a huge difference if workers are harassed in the workplace, forced into captive audience meetings, forced into one-on-ones, followed around the workplace while they're doing their job, surveilled. I mean, surveillance is a huge issue. So the bare minimum is that workers deserve to know who the hell these people are.
Yes, that is so important, and having that anecdote is something that I'm going to try to commit to memory, because that is just crazy. And it's true that it's good that unions have this level of transparency. I mean, Steve in the chat said so many people don't realize you can look up your union's filings and find out exactly where every penny goes, and I've done that, right? And you can do that, and that's good. And that's good, right? And so why? And obviously, the employer generally does not have these same kinds of responsibilities, but they do have a similar level of responsibility when it comes to the union busters. And 80 to 90% of unions, you said, are like initially in compliance, and virtually 100% get into compliance, whereas employers only 18% are compliant with these regulations. That is absolutely ridiculous. And I do think it's important that people have this information, because if you realize that this fellow in front of you is getting paid $400 an hour to tell you that unions are bad, well, that might color how you receive that information. And so, that is really important work that you're doing. And, Adam, I didn't prep you for this one, so maybe I don't know if you have one off the top of your head, but Adam was like, we should ask him what's the craziest thing that he's uncovered while he's been doing this. So I'm interested in, like, do you have like the craziest thing that you've uncovered since you've been doing Labor Lab?
I mean, there's so many. Crazy is probably not the right word. Horrifying might be the right word. And there are so many examples of this. I think here's one of, because it ended well and the nurses won their election, but we were helping with a campaign where they had hired a union busting consultant to come in. And we're forcing captive audience meetings. We did put out a report to the media that this guy hadn't actually made a disclosure, which, if just a quick aside, that is hugely helpful since these guys don't actually comply with the law. If you think you have a persuader in the workplace, please reach out to us, because we are basically doing the work that the Department of Labor should be doing. That is the central goal of our nonprofit. But back to your point. So we were working on a campaign with some nurses. They were having union busting was going crazy. A nurse came in one day and was starting her shift and opened the shared drive at the hospital, and right there, sitting there, was a spreadsheet of entitled like worker analysis, and she opened it, and it was a spreadsheet of every nurse in the hospital with personal information and how it could be leveraged against them. So this consultant had sat there and worked with the HR department, potentially the CEO, and went through everyone. And this is the stuff that was in it. One nurse had bad knees, so she, was looking for retirement. So how could that be leveraged against her? Another one had two disabled children, and how could that be leveraged against them, including their personal information, where they lived. It was incredible that they were dumb enough to accidentally save that to the share drive. In fact, the HR director sent out an all hospital email saying, if you saw that, please delete it. Please don't forward it around or anything like that. The nurses printed it out, of course, and put it in everyone's mailbox so that they could see just what their employer thought about them. And that's an example of like the curtain really being pulled back on these folks. But we have, plenty of examples, like an 8-hour captive audience meeting where the guy kept refusing to say what his name was and where he was from. I'm not sure how that captive audience meeting would have been productive, but I mean, these are some of the horrifying stories of, the attacks on especially Black and brown communities, and the fear mongering around that is incredibly horrifying and is obviously on the rise as well. But these folks, they will do anything to leverage your personal information, your family and how it's struggling against you to try to beat the union. So they don't give a damn about you, especially if they've gone to the extent of hiring what is called an anti-union persuader. If they've gone to that far, they do not give a damn. They just want to keep you down. And I mean, that spreadsheet, it blew up in their face, which is what's so powerful when we're able to come in, help them, and really expose where their priorities are. If you're willing to spend more money on one person in an hour than you are 8 people in a day, that says a lot about how much you actually care about a relationship with your employees.
You mentioned that during the last administration, you were trying to do a lot to bring attention to this issue. Obviously, we have a new administration now, but I'm always told that the Department of Labor secretary is awesome and that she loves working people and that she's going to be a great champion for unions. And so Trump has appointed somebody to lead the portion of the Department of Labor. So this is not Lori Chavez-Dreamer. I don't remember her name, but Trump has appointed somebody else to oversee the portion of the Department of Labor that oversees these operations that does not seem very union friendly. So I'm just very flummoxed at this whole situation because I've been told that Lori Chavez-Dreamer is great and she's going to lead the Department of Labor in great ways. And so I'm just totally bamboozled by what's going on here. But can you help me understand a little bit more? Tell us a little bit more about the person who's going to be leading the OLMS within the department. And do you have confidence that Chavez DeRemer is going to be making her aggressively pursue compliance with these laws?
So a number of things to unpack there, obviously. I think the first is, the previous administration really was taking this issue seriously, which is literally the first time that corporate transparency and union buster transparency has been taken seriously since the LMRDA was passed. Obviously not enough progress made. I mean, I think the high watermark for compliance was 35%, something like that. Don't hold me to it, but well below 50. And the reason I bring that up is and I think the entire labor movement does not put its eggs in the basket of Congress or agencies. It's really our solidarity together, which is why we do a lot of work specifically with organizing campaigns where union busters aren't complying with the law, but we have gathered enough information on them that we can fill the void that the Department of Labor has surrendered at this point. To your larger point about the state of the Department of Labor, I mean, we're very alarmed with all of the layoffs that are happening there. We are watching all of this very, very closely. It doesn't seem like this administration, and it's clear that they don't actually care about working people. I will say that our main priority is to see which political hacks are brought into the Department of Labor over time, because they're the ones that can initiate stuff to go after unions. And so this new director of OLMS is Elizabeth Messenger. She's the former CEO of Americans for Fair Treatment. They were trying to be cute and have the same name as AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. So be sure to always call them AFFT. And this organization, Americans for Fair Treatment, was set up. Basically, sole purpose was to take advantage of the Janus decision and harass teachers into opting out of the union. And as someone that used to work for a union that was 50% teachers, I can tell you how these people operate. It's pretty horrifying. For example, school districts get public records requests. Give us the names of all the teachers in your district and where they live, so that we can go knock on their door, call them, send them texts, and harass them into dropping their union membership. Probably the most famous institution for this is the Freedom Foundation, but the Elizabeth Messenger's organizations, Americans for Fair Treatment, heavily funded by the State Policy Network and tied to ALEC, purely set up to try to weaken working people's power, specifically in the public sector. So this is concerning, obviously, because we already know that unions are good with complying with the law, but we do think that this signals that the Office of Labor Management is going to be going after unions, especially when it comes to creating administrative headaches with audits and things like that. Listen, we're going to continue to create public pressure on this and say that you need to do your job. We are worried that we're going to go back to where we were during the first Trump administration, where compliance with corporations and consultants basically cratered. We haven't quite seen that yet, so we're going to be keeping an eye on it. And honestly, Jacob, like, if they're smart and they want to say, "Hey, we're really on the side of workers," then they would be implementing the Inspector General's report more aggressively than the Biden administration is. They're not going to do that. I don't think so. I mean, I would be shocked. But I think, to the larger point, is we are not expecting to have a lot of friends in this administration. We're not expecting to have a partnership like we did in the past. And that is why our independent work is so important. As you all know, nothing is given to working people. Nothing is handed to the working class. We've organized before an NLRA. We can organize without one. Hopefully that's not the case. But I hope you understand my point that we are going to continue to call out the administration and the Department of Labor, just like we did under Biden, for not doing its job. But at least then we had partners. This time, our independent work is so much more important, and why we set this organization up, because administrations change and the labor movement cannot depend on tracking and holding union busters accountable just because of who's at the Department of Labor.
Bob Funk, Executive Director of Labor Lab, a employer watchdog organization. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate your work. Thank you for your organization's support of the Valley Labor Report. Look forward to continuing our partnership into the rest of this year and beyond, hopefully, and letting more folks know about the important work that y'all are doing over there. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for all you're doing, especially in the South. You guys rock.
Appreciate it. All right. Again, that was Bob Funk, Labor Lab. You can find more information about them at laborlab.us. And if you are in a workplace and you feel like, hey, this guy is, I don't recognize him. I don't remember seeing him out and about.
He's got some really expensive shoes on.
Yeah, those are that's a fancy Rolex for a frontline supervisor here at Mercedes. Reach out to Labor Lab, let them know, and maybe they can do some digging for you. It's really cool, some of the information that they have about these folks. So really appreciate his time. We've got some more guests. Guest heavy show today, but we've
had some great guests today. Really great guests. I've enjoyed all the conversations. Started strong with Starbucks Workers United, Birmingham and Huntsville represented, and really enjoyed that conversation with Ryan Kaggel. There was a lot more I wanted to dig into there, and Bob is doing really tremendous work at Labor Lab. If you are not familiar with the website, definitely check it out. There's a union busting tracker. You can find out what's going on in your state. Like Jacob said, you can report issues to them. So they're doing really, really essential work. And I appreciate it. I'm taking a strategic corporate research class right now, and
that sounds super fun.
Right? Yeah, not the lightest reading, and it has made me appreciate folks like Bob even more. Folks who can do this kind of digging and uncover these documents and sort through it all to help us get usable information for organizing out in the field. So really appreciate it.
Yep. We have on the line now Matt Leck and David Griscom of Left Reckoning. Matt Leck, also a super producer on the Majority Report, here to talk to us about abundance. Matt, David, welcome back to the program. Really appreciate y'all taking the time.
Good to be here, guys.
Yeah, very happy to be here, friends.
It's great to have you. Been too long, as you said on Twitter, David. So really happy to be rectifying that wrong. So we have yet to wade in, at least on the program, into this abundance agenda discourse that's being driven by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson with their new book, Abundance. And it's being pushed really heavily. And I have been a little bit surprised at the longevity of this discourse. I mean, it started, what was it, 2 months ago or something? It's been a minute. And it has maintained as a sort of kind of third level consistent discourse within kind of the broader, Democratic left-wing progressive space. And so I felt like, especially, and unions have been kind of a third level of the abundance discourse for the whole time, but it's been, the relevance of unions to the abundance discourse has been driven up in the wake of the tariff stuff, and it's been largely negative towards unions, and so I felt like it was time for us to kind of wade into that. But before we wade into abundance and unions and what's the interplay there, can you and we'll start with you, Matt, can you lay out like what is the abundance agenda that is being pushed by Ezra Klein and some of these other folks? What is it actually, and what does it purport to be?
Yeah, so Ezra Klein of actually he's not at Vox. Is he still at Vox anymore?
He's at the New York Times now. Yeah.
Right. So formerly at Vox, formerly before that at the Washington Post, has always been sort of like the technocrat whisperer, even going back to the Obama years when he would be talking to like blue dogs about how we can get budgets passed and stuff like that. Abundance is their new sort of pitch for. I find it one interesting exchange I find is from a Bloomberg columnist named Connor Sen, and he quote tweeted a review from a sort of neoliberal guy saying, "Not sure what the voters think," which is an interesting way to start that. But the Dem staffer class needs to move on from Warrenism, and abundance seems like as good of template as any. And I think what it is basically these sorts of technocratic type of folks don't like that Joe Biden thought it was good politics to go walk a picket line, or that Build Back Better was so influenced by progressives. And they're trying to reassert a sort of technocratic pro-capitalist, get out of the capitalist way with your regulations that won't let us build, slums near interstates and stuff like that, because that's what's really making America fall behind in terms of its productive capacity. And I think there's a pretty clear reason everyone can understand listening to this why that's offensive to people. We can maybe all agree that there are certain regulations that do get in the way of development in this country. Mm-hmm. Generally, those aren't placed there by Elizabeth Warren staffers, in my opinion. But if there's anything I missed, David, I'll let you go on.
If you've ever read a book and it had a big claim and you're very excited to get into it, don't pick up this one, because if you pick up this one with the hope that like you're going to get this grand theory of politics that they kind of purport is in this book, you're going to be very sad by the end of it when you realize it's like, oh yeah, I mean, basically like the main argument here is that we should do some kind of we should lessen some regulations on like construction, which, as Matt was saying, and I think most reasonable people agree, it's like, there are probably plenty of regulations in the United States that are, contrary to good policy. A big reason for that, though, is not so much that there's too many like busybodies, but that America is a very litigious country. And we have set up an entire incentive structure, for example, to sort of sue the NGO complex, all this kind of stuff. Like there is like money to be made in sort of maintaining those kind of things. That's probably why they exist versus like some people just sort of had the wrong idea or were too passionate about, saving the birds or something like that. But again, like this is the thing that's kind of tough about this book and the larger abundance discourse is that there's some really small claims, right? That, probably are their favorite terrain to sort of engage on. It's like, is there overregulation in some aspects of American society, which is a fairly like narrow point. And then they sort of inflated into like this larger argument about like American politics and American society. Is like that is like one like the thing that's holding America back from this grand abundant regime, right? Because the title of the book and this whole process now is called Abundance, right? And what does that imply? It's like, oh, we're going to have a lot of stuff, we're going to have achieve excesses and medical access and money and all these kind of things, and what they're which is like a huge claim, right? And I think that as a socialist and something like that, like I think that like we do need to produce more things for people, right? People need more than they have right now. But again, that's very different from just sort of saying that, oh, the thing that's holding us back is these kind of small scale regulations things. So it's just there's a tension here where like there's a really big claim about like we need abundance. Fine, interesting. Let's talk about that. And then like the actual mechanism there is sort of like, hey, let's like twiddle around, the regulatory state. And the last thing I'll say is that, why is it, I think, of note to people? Why are people sort of engaging with it? Because it's very clear that this is a kind of pitch by Klein and Thompson and others, right? There's all these groups now, these abundance political organizations that have been set up with a lot of money from San Francisco, Silicon Valley, all of these kind of forces that are trying to make this the argument of the Democratic Party so that it can avoid, maybe the Elizabeth Warren style, or the Bernie Sanders AOC more left populist politics. And that's really, I think, what a lot of the argument is about, is people realizing is like, oh, this is just their attempt to kind of rebrand that old school kind of centrist third way politics as something new.
And I just to tack on to David's thing real quick. I think that them naming Warren and not naming, say, Bernie, who's out there filling actual and AOC filling stadiums, I think is just, a sort of sign of their political weakness.
Yeah, well, it was a bummer for me because I confessed to David in our email thread that I was initially, when this first started, I was abundance curious. They kind of reeled me in a little bit, and I was, because I think there's, obviously, you mentioned the small points, and most people would agree with some of the, there's probably some housing regulations that are bad, or there are some housing regulations that are bad, sure, but also there was it feels like I remember reading something about, the high-speed rail stuff, and there were too many like individual stakeholders and constituents that could get in the way of this. And like, look, it's a bummer, if you're a person and you've had a house that the rail is going to need to go through, then, that's a bummer for you. But like, here's some money, and for the good of the country and California and the state and the people, we're going to eminent domain your land. And I'm sorry, but, and like, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And we do need to be forcefully in support of like, the collective good, and say like, look, just because it would be a little bit more convenient for you to have this little plot of land, like, I'm sorry, here's like a shit ton of money, go away. We need to support stuff like that, right? And so I was hopeful that was kind of that would, and that was a big part of like the FDR thing, is that the government is big, and we're going to do stuff, and we're going to make people's lives better, and we're going to give people union jobs, we're going to give people good wages, and it's all good, that's all really important, but it does not seem like that's the focus.
Jacob,
yeah.
I just want to add, like, the FDR stuff, like, those are the kind of things that should get folks excited. But that's exactly what is kind of missing in the book. Again, if this was an argument for, like, let's revitalize America with, like, big Green New Deal projects, or with the Tennessee Valley Authority, or all these kind of things, I would be going to the mat for it. But that's not what it is, because it's not about, like, unleashing the state to build railroads or to build, power systems. It is get out of the way of, literally, like, one of the people that they praise in it is Elon Musk. Right. It's like, it's private actors. It's not state actors. It's not collective actors. It's get the state out of the way so the private market can succeed.
And he's and praising Elon Musk as a part of even the smaller abundance stuff, like having him even remotely like lauded, is ludicrous, because he was one of the chief obstacles to high-speed rail in California, and he admitted as much, and he admitted that it was because he doesn't like public, and he wanted to personally sabotage it because it would be better for his businesses if high-speed rail, which is ostensibly one of their big, like, white whales that they want to see happen. They want to see high-speed rail. And it's like, well, Elon Musk was like a big stop to that. And the idea that you would be positively, referencing him in this discourse is crazy. And can you talk, I've heard, I think, Matt, on the Majority Report, some of the other backers, and it's not just, the third way neoliberal types, and there's some of that, but there's also like real right-wing libertarian Koch brothers type of folks lined up behind this agenda. Is that right?
Well, I think what they would argue is that they sort of came to this similar idea at the same time, and with similar sort of friends in their social groups. But I think Ezra Klein does sort of sort of say his abundance agenda is slightly different than a libertarian like Tyler Cowen's abundance agenda, even though, they have conversations about it and, compare meanings, which is, I think it says a lot that Ezra Klein has these conversations with folks like Richard Hanania, who I think is a racist guy, or Tyler Cowen, and not Sean Fain. Or Sean O'Brien has a podcast. Let's see that conversation happen. But it's with all these sorts of guys who, like Connor said with Bloomberg, it's like people who basically, like, when they say that they think labor is in the way, I find it really difficult to believe that it's not just their preconceived political impulse and not their actual understanding of what's going on in politics.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really kind of, it's definitely convenient, right, that they just happen to have these similar ideas at the same time. And so I mentioned at the top that unions have kind of, unions have not been at the center of the abundance sort of discourse, but they have been kind of at the periphery throughout, and they have been more centered since the tariff stuff. Can you talk? Like, what are some of the people in the abundance orbit, and some of the people in the abundance orbit are like the Armand Daluski or something on Twitter, Matt Iglesias, Ezra Klein, Derek Thompson, Tyler Cohen, people like this. What are some of the things that they have been saying, like, generally about unions in relation to this abundance agenda? And then specifically, it seems like the rhetoric against unions has sharpened since the tariffs. What have been some of their lines since then?
Well, I mean, I'll just say, first up is unions are sort of treated, at least in the abundance book, and by a lot of those folks, particularly private sector unions, as like a special interest group that sort of needs to be challenged, right? So it's already, they're if it's not going so far as to saying like unions are like the enemy of this project, but saying unions are one of these groups who are going to have to sort of push around. When it comes to like the ecosystem, the solar system, or whatever you want to call it, of the Abundance Boys, I mean, I think it's been abundantly clear to me. Sorry for no pun intended. That these guys are really trying to utilize this moment with tariffs, with both Sean Fain and also Sean O'Brien in the Teamsters, which are different kind of stories. But you can see that there has been this project, I think, over the past 6 months. It probably, had its origins way before that. But like, there has been this kind of hope that, like, unions have been getting too much influence in the Democratic Party, according to a lot of these folks. They want to see that be pushed back. So yeah, that Armand fella, has been attacking, Sean Fain and the UAW, as I believe rent seekers. I have to double check the exact framing.
I think that was Dylan Matthews.
Oh, Dylan Matthews went even further, and called
Sean Fain a wrecker.
A wrecker.
Yeah. And it is also worth noting, I saw that exchange. It's worth noting he was calling, he was like utilizing an article that was written by Luis Leon of Labor Notes for the American Prospect. He was basically holding this up as as a puppet and ostensibly saying that the accusation of Luis in the American Prospect is that Sean Fain is a wrecker. And Luis quote tweeted Dylan Matthews and was like, that is not at all what I'm saying. You are totally misreading my piece if that's what you took away from it. And Luis has been like very frustrated, as I think is his right, with the UAW as a person of Hispanic descent in this, particular, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about the immigration stuff later on in the program. I mean, it's a very scary time to be a Hispanic person, a visibly Hispanic person, somebody who speaks Spanish in this country right now. And so he has been publicly critical of the UAW. And so even he was like, whoa, Dylan, that is literally not what I'm saying. And I don't think Dylan ever corrected himself. But yeah, continue, David.
I mean, I'll just tell you this. I mean, I think that this is going to be a moment that we're going to see how serious a lot of progressives were and have been about their support of the working class and unions. I mean, these things get, people, I think a lot of progressives, or whatever you call them, the Democrats, have sort of viewed unions as like an extension of themselves and like their party. And whenever they sort of see that challenge, they oftentimes lash out, right? Which unfortunately shows, I think, an unfortunate reality that like there is a little bit of hollowness to some of the claims we have been seeing over the past few years, where people say like, oh, well, we need like the left or the Democratic Party to be union led. And when they see that those ideas or demands from unions might be different from the ones that are coming out of, the mouths of Democratic Party politicians or Democratic Party pundits, you start to see that tension, and we'll see how serious folks are. I'm still going to continue to advocate for what we've been advocating for. I'm not saying the cause is lost, but I think that they see that this is going to be very effective. Because I mean, I don't know about y'all probably, y'all's audience probably follows maybe union politics and understands these issues a little bit better. But Matt and I have been covering the tariffs and particularly the UAW stuff. I mean, our comment section is a cesspool of literal misinformation too, unfortunately, of people saying things like, Sean Fain endorsed Donald Trump, which he didn't, right? Sean Fain endorsed like the blanket tariffs, which he didn't. But you can see why the abundance guys are sort of pushing this and other folks are pushing it, because it is very effective as people particularly become very negatively polarized around the issue of tariffs. And now, I think, unfortunately, you're seeing a lot of people who a couple of years ago might have understood why free trade was a disaster, going to the mat and saying, oh, well, free trade is something that shouldn't be touched anymore, which is an absurd position.
Yeah, can I put up a tweet here? I just want to show this. I don't know if this will screw up the formatting here, but this is this Connor Sen tweet I was talking about. Not sure what voters think about the Dem Starver class. I just want to go to a follow-up here because I think it's kind of revealing. Guy responds, I just don't know how you can ever square this with organized labor being an essential component of your coalition. Bloomberg opinion writer Connor Sen says the obvious answer is organized labor isn't going to be as important to the coalition in the future. Mike Conzel, a economist I like, said, I think the way to square it is that the increase in construction costs aren't labor driven. See below. He cites a American Economic Journal piece. And then European countries build faster, cheaper, and their labor markets are even more unionized and secure.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sen follows up with, this is again a Bloomberg writer, I just feel like the Dems went all in on unions and unions shifted somewhat towards Trump in 2024. So electorally it failed, open to other interpretations. Now, that's not what happened in 2024.
Right.
American Prospect, the place you mentioned before, or this is Center for American Progress actually, but while other voters moved away from the Democrats, union members shifted toward Harris in 2024. Yes. So that to me is a very strange mistake to make if you say one of your goals is to beat Republicans, that you would completely get the direction or the trend for union votes wrong as you attempt to say like, you know what, screw them.
Yeah. Well, it because it is such a simple, like, it would literally just take one Google search, like, oh, did union members trend towards Trump this time? And the answer is no. And not only is the answer no, but also if everybody had voted the way that union members did, Harris would be president, obviously, with Obama-level majorities in the House and Senate. I mean, it would be the largest, it would, so the idea that, union members, more demographic, and they moved even more Democratic in no small part thanks to the UAW, which ran one of its most extensive political operations for Harris and against Trump in 2024. And there are people that think that was a good idea and think it wasn't a good idea and think that the funds could have been used differently. But that's just a reality that, and they were able to move their membership more towards Harris, I think, than any other union. I mean, they released a report about their political program in 2024, and it was astounding how far they were able to push their membership towards Harris, even and especially relevantly in swing states, right? I mean, so this is, and if the UAW, and here I believe this is something that they pointed out in their report, if the UAW had not done the program that they did, then one of the Democrats in Michigan would not have won. I think there was a Democrat in one of the swing states that won, even though Harris lost, and they did that on the margin of the UAW votes, right? So yeah, that like you said, man, that is a crazy mistake to make.
But it feels
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And, I'm just curious your guys' perspective, because it feels like, all these issues, whether it's immigration or the tariffs or this abundance stuff, It seems to be, not to get psychological, but anxiety avoidance. Capitalism, American capitalism, Western capitalism, whatever you want to call it, it just seems intent on avoiding the actual question, which is, why is China kicking our ass on all of this stuff? And so instead, and I look, I haven't read Abundance yet. I'm going to, because Ezra Klein wants to come on Majority Report, and I want to read the book before he does that. I'm not going to be debating him, but I just want to read that. But
yeah,
again, like,
so you're going to do that
seems
like
to be
this afternoon, right? In like 30 minutes.
I'll do it, over the next week. Yeah.
Well, I thought you read books at like 16x speed or something like that.
Those are books that I enjoy. I can read them in one sitting, but I don't know about this one. But it's just like, why? And then like okay, forget China. Look at America's history. When have we produced things? When have we built things? And how much do we need to do the neoliberal, let's get out of the job creators' way, because they're the ones that are going to deliver like people getting excited about the Boring Company with Elon Musk, thinking that they don't drill tunnels in other parts of the world is just really embarrassing for a country that used to be, one of the most productive in the world.
It really is embarrassing, Matt. Yeah, and I want to underscore that about like the some of the response to the tariff stuff that I'm seeing. I'm seeing some really kind of perplexing arguments from some even like progressive people about tariffs, specifically the one that, tariffs are automatically going to be passed on to the consumer. I mean, that is like just not true. We can agree or disagree with the whole tariff program or with tariffs generally or with this specific or whatever, but it is just not true that all of the tariffs will be pushed on to the consumer. I mean, that's just never the way that any tax. I mean, if you accept that 100% of the tariffs are going to be passed on to the consumer, then what does that mean for any system of taxation, progressive, regressive, whatever? What is it? If we accept the idea that all of a tax is going to be passed on to the consumer, then what does that mean for progressive taxation? Like, I've heard some people say stuff like that have really confused me. And also that's just not the way that it's happened historically when sometimes, there have been sometimes parts of tariffs or wholes of tariff or even more than a tariff have been passed on to consumers. And then there have been part of the times where tariffs have been eaten by the company because they have enough profits to do that, and they didn't think that the market would bear an increased cost. And I'm really concerned that all of this stuff is going to, like the talk about inflation did during the pandemic, allow companies to get away with price gouging. And I have a clip from the UAW about what Stellantis is doing in response to some of this tariff stuff that I want to play for us now, because it's really concerning. And like, people do not need to let companies like Stellantis and any other company get away with the idea that they can pass all of the tariffs or even more than all of the tariffs onto consumers, and that they can't eat at least a significant portion of these tariffs in the massive profits that they have. Here's this clip from the UAW on Stellantis.
Hey UAW family. A couple weeks ago, Stellantis laid off more than 900 of our UAW brothers and sisters. They used auto tariffs as their excuse. But this Tuesday, at their annual shareholders meeting, Stellantis board of directors managed to find $2.6 billion to spend on dividends for their shareholders. And they are considering an additional stock buyback of up to 10% of the company's stocks. That's another $2 billion or more. That means this company is considering spending more than half of their total profits from 2024 on Wall Street paybacks. Do you know what they didn't find money for? Investing in jobs. If they wanted, Stellantis could bring back every laid-off worker back to work and then some using excess capacity that exists in almost every single plant. I'm looking at Toledo South, Belvedere, Mack and JNAP, Warren Truck, Trenton Engine, and several of our Kokomo plants. We know these plants could be building profitable product. We know there are people ready to work. We know these communities need these jobs. So why is it there's always money for Wall Street, but there's never money for the people that make the product that makes this company run? Thousands of our UAW members are laid off right now, and the auto tariffs give this company a golden opportunity to do what's right. Invest in us. It is time for Stellantis to stop dragging their feet. That is why I am calling UAW members to speak up with a simple message: invest in us. Next week, we are asking members to wear stickers with this demand: They are being put in the mail today to your local leadership. Show Stellantis that it is time to stop blowing money on Wall Street when there's plenty of work to do and plenty of auto workers to do it. You will hear more soon about how we are going to make sure Stellantis invests in the workers that makes this company billions. Get ready, and Stellantis, invest in us.
So, they're really excited to see that campaign coming out from the UAW. Stellantis has obviously been one of the worst off of the big three, and yet they still had $8 billion in profits, and they want to spend half of that just enriching their shareholders. And it's worth also putting that into context. These new contracts from 2023, the new monies in those contracts was something like between $8 to $10 billion over the course of the agreement. Immediately after the agreements were announced back in 2023, GM specifically announced a $10 billion stock buyback scheme in 1 year, right? They spent in 1 year on shareholders the same amount of money, the same amount of new money that they were spending on workers over 5 years, right? And so this is like, there's, Matt, you've said, we need to understand that rich people and these corporations are piñatas that we need to break apart and take all of the money that's inside of these piñatas. And so I'm really concerned about some of this tariff rhetoric that's going around. And so, David, Matt, how are y'all receiving some of this stuff? And what do you make of some of the stuff that I just said?
A lot of the people that are we need to shut up about X or Y and do this tariff thing are the sort of people who spent the run up to the last election saying, hey, actually Biden's economy is way good enough to beat Trump, and you should shut up about, cost of rent and those things. And now they want to move on from, like, say, people getting disappeared for writing op-eds to talk about how great free trade is. I think it's very good that Bernie Sanders is still out there saying, I'm not. When he interviews the trade representatives, like, he goes on this minute-long speech before he asks a question about, I'm not afraid of free, or I'm not a fan of free trade generally, right? That sort of thing. Like, that's the issue here. Is like, okay, you want us to focus on tariffs. I think there are certain issues with people's retirements and 401ks and type of job losses that are things that we definitely need to focus on here. But also the idea that, like, the message, we don't agree on the message we're going to talk about these tariffs with. We want more central planning to actually make these things work, because what happens when we leave this thing up to Stellantis is they line the pockets of all the thieves that have been robbing us.
Right. Yeah, we saw. Oh man, I had something else that I wanted to include, and I just lost it. I'll think about it. But Adam, were you about to say something?
Well, I just wanted to circle back to something Matt said earlier, which is about the anxiety of capitalism and how we're constantly kind of being pushed away from recognizing the systemic crisis that we're facing, right? Like, before y'all came on, we were talking about why union power is relevant to everybody, right? Like, if you're a non-union worker, if you're a student, retiree, hell, even a small business owner, right? Union power is important because as union power has declined, inequality has skyrocketed, right? The billionaires have become more and more and more and more wealthy at our expense because we have less union power to hold some of that profits that we're generating and put it back into our pockets, right? Like, it seems like a pretty simple thing, but it does seem like a lot of these conversations in politics these days are meant to take away from, like, that essential fact that we have historic levels of inequality. We're in a new Gilded Age, right? It's at the root of multiple layers of crisis that we're dealing with. We know that workers organizing and building power amongst themselves is a way to address this, right? So then we're having conversations about, construction regulations, right? And how that's actually what's holding us back, right? So yeah, I just wanted to really underscore that point you made, Matt, because I think it really is so true, and it's relevant because I think folks are generally alienated, and there's a lot of alienation and isolation and atomization in our society, and we know, the systemic causes of that, but I think it's made worse by the fact that everyone in, that powerful media figures and the discourse, quote unquote, is not recognizing, right, like the lived realities that you have and the real roots of these causes, or roots of these evils.
And I'd add too, just on that like alienation thing, it's like they're a big part of like this tariff conversation about what we were just talking about with Stellantis, is naturalizing choices made by capitalists and bosses, right? There is no kind of like, God ordained rule that says that Stellantis has to, manipulate its stock price, in this moment, and lay off workers. That is a deliberate choice by them, right? Something that should, by the way, be illegal. And what happens when, you're talking about like, tariffs will necessarily raise prices. It's a great thing to push back against as well, right? Because that's the same argument that people say when we fight for $15 an hour, $20 an hour. Well, everything's going to get inflated because a capitalist would never take a haircut on the profits that they're taking, right? And this is where these kind of arguments that you get from people, in our milieu, end up being very, very conservative and reactionary even, because they treat the activities of the capitalist class as, natural, as unmovable, instead of things that are going to respond to working class power and politics, right? And frankly, not to throw this, this bomb in here, but the fact of the matter is that, disagree or agree with Trump's tariffs, right? I think that they're kind of disastrous, not really well thought out, all that kind of stuff. But you look at an organization like the UAW that has been saying for decades, we need to break the free trade system. We need to break the free trade system. And you had multiple opportunities in the Democratic Party to maybe do something about that, to address it. And not only did you not get it, you have Obama trying to do TPP at the end of his term. So maybe you disagree with this, but the fact of the matter is, I can't blame somebody. And I'm not even saying that this is necessarily their strategy, but there might be an attitude that's just sort of like, hey, let's just break it, right? This might not be like an economically like great program, but like this might gum up, destroy the free trade system. So then there's an opportunity to do something. Because I'll tell you right now, I think it's very clear that the Democratic Party isn't going to touch or attack free trade. Like if let's say Trump loses the midterms, the Democrats come in with all the power, in the next presidential cycle, they're not going to do anything to undo free trade, right? Every signal that we're getting is that they want to reaffirm that kind of system, right? So this is where you might not need to, consider being a little bit radical, and that comes with risk. That comes with risk, no doubt about it. But I think that this has exposed a reality that kind of coalition, at least of leadership in the Democratic Party, isn't going to touch this system.
Yeah, and I think that, and like you said, there's room for agreement or disagreement about what the extent one should support the Trump tariffs. And I think that we have, you and I and Sean Fain all have very similar takes. I mean, Sean Fain himself said, which is another thing that you said people are just straight up misrepresenting Fain. He said that these tariffs are erratic and too broad and don't make sense, right? And so, like, let's actually deal with what the position of the UAW is, which is that the free trade system has been a disaster. We need to break it up. Some of the things that Trump is doing right now with respect to that are good, and some of them are not. And we want to make sure that the ones that are good stay and the ones that are bad go. And so, like, that seems to me to be a totally reasonable thing that you can agree or disagree with. And I think, and I'm concerned about, the idea of rank and file Democrats being negatively polarized against tariffs because it's Trump. Trump did it, and so now I hate it. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about if the whole thing goes through and it tanks the economy, is that going to negatively polarize everybody and into supporting free trade? There are concerns, and so and there are strategic questions about maybe by attaching yourself rhetorically to some of this tariff program, are you potentially hurting your ability to advocate for something in the future? These are all things that we can discuss and like that are valuable. But the thing that is really important to underscore is like that the unions have a reason for their positions, and it is not our job to message for Democrats, unlike what Hakeem Jeffries seems to think, right? I mean, that's not, He was quoted in Politico as saying like, oh, the UAW and the steelworkers are really gumming up the works with our messaging and really mudding the waters. And it's like, well, buddy, I'm sorry.
But that's revealing.
Not our job.
That's very revealing, because I think they see, labor institutions and, the labor leadership as being just loyal lieutenants.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, you look at recent decades, and I guess that's kind of, an accurate thing. I mean, at least with a lot of, in respect to a lot of leadership and a lot of the, big labor institutional power has been, pretty loyal to the Democratic Party, perhaps unquestioningly so, perhaps blindly so, and have just seen them, kind of taken them for granted, I think.
It's
in that respect.
It's worth pointing out that the UAW, even at, it would be one thing if the UAW was, a little bit supporting the tariffs and not saying anything else about the other stuff. But the UAW has been one of the most vocal critics about the other 98% of the Trump regime. Right. And so, like, it would be one thing if Sean Fain was pulling like a Sean O'Brien. I think I'm much more critical of what O'Brien is doing. And I think it's problematic, frankly, what he's doing. But that is not what Sean Fain is doing. I mean, Sean Fain is being very publicly and clearly critical of most of the things that Trump is doing. And his union is leading the way on those things. And so, the idea that you would deal with a Fain in the same way that you're dealing with O'Brien is just, it's silly. It's not serious. And, and even O'Brien, because he's a union leader, I think deserves some, a level of deference from, the political class that, that somebody like a Hakeem Jeffries or something like that shouldn't be given. But so I really appreciate y'all taking the time. We're at about where we said we would stop originally. We have a couple of clips that I wanted to play. David said that he didn't have a heart out, so he's good to round out the show with us. Matt, are you do you have a heart out, or are you good to listen to talk about some other things?
I can watch a few more clips.
Okay. So one of the other things that the Trump administration is doing is obviously around immigration. I mean, they're rolling out this real scary deportation regime. And for the people who listen to us who are immigration skeptical, it's worth sitting with the fact that the promise of the Trump administration was that we're going to take out the bad ones first, right? The gang members and the really scary people who are killing Americans all over the place, and that's not what they're doing right now. And they have been resigned to locking people up for writing op-eds. Right. I mean, this is what they're doing now with ICE. And so, if you come from a good faith place of immigration skepticism, which I think, you should question that. But if that's where you're coming from, maybe think about like, why is it that less than 100 days into this administration, they're locking up people for writing op-eds? Like, surely there just must be some immigrants out there who have actually committed violent crimes left. I mean, there must be. Why aren't they spending effort going after those people? Well, maybe it's because that's not actually the agenda. But, there's been a lot of crackdown on speech against Palestine and stuff like that in particular. And the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case, where there is no logic from the government that would prevent them from spiriting away one of us, U.S. citizens, in the middle of the night, taking us to El Salvador and dropping us off and saying, oh, well, we don't have jurisdiction anymore. There's nothing stopping them from doing that in the logic that they are arguing before the courts with. And just to underscore the fact that this is where this administration seems to be, where their heads are, this is counterterrorism czar Sebastian Gorka, a literal administration official, floating the idea that publicly saying Kilmar Abrego Garcia is being wrongfully detained in El Salvador is tantamount to aiding and abetting terrorism. Let's play that.
There's one line that divides us. Do you love America or do you hate America? It's really quite that simple. And we have people who love America, like the president, like his cabinet, like the directors of his agencies, who want to protect Americans. And then there is the other side that is on the side of the cartel members, on the side of the illegal aliens, on the side of the terrorists. And you have to ask yourself, are they technically aiding and abetting them? Because aiding and abetting criminals and terrorists is a crime in federal statute, Rob.
I don't know how anybody hears that and is not absolutely chilled. It sounds, even verbalizing some of these concerns, the idea that one of us would be, whisked away, it's like fantastical, and I don't want to believe that's going to happen. But like, I can hear right now people on some of the right-wing radio stations that we air on justifying my detention in a prison because because they would say, I support Hamas. I hate Israel. I support terrorism. And let's play this clip from his show where he says some bad things about Israel. Doesn't that mean he should, I can literally hear it right now. And so this is, it's just so far out of control. And, I'm wondering what y'all how y'all are dealing with some of this, or what are some of the things that you think is important to pull out of this immigration conversation?
I don't know where in the Constitution it specifies how much you love America, sort of guaranteeing you certain rights. First of all, like, it's just an absurd opening from Mr. Gorka. Again, not even trying to play like a nationalist card, but absurd too to have somebody who speaks like that talking about sending Americans away. Right? Are you kidding me? Lastly, this is what all of these kind of reactionary regimes try to do, which is to create special circumstances so the fundamental rights that we have as Americans, that we all understand deeply, and my ancestors have fought and died for, right? And have fought to continue, because there's always been a section of the rich and the powerful, by the way, who don't want there to be people in this country who have the freedom of speech. So again, like, instead of these conversations being about what they really are about, by the way, is the fact that the government of Israel, right, and that Zionist project for years has been trying to chip away at Americans' right to free speech because it is a threat to their capacity to abuse and harm people in Israel. They have been pushing against our rights here in this country for so long that now we have somebody like Seb Gorka going on television saying people criticizing this foreign government, right? We should allow for those people to be deported from this country, right? And trying to open up the door, right? Trying to use special circumstances, to sort of start to get the public used to this idea, so that when they do start coming for American citizens instead of green card holders, who, by the way, are entitled to every constitutional protection as citizens, that is settled American law. That it becomes it seems reasonable, or at least normal, or at least an unfortunate part of the politics that you might be a little bit uncomfortable with. But the fact of the matter is that the Constitution is very clear on this. Our culture, our history, our politics are very clear on this, that we believe in living in a democratic society where people have the right to criticize our government, and sure as hell a foreign government.
Right. Yeah, Zaid Jilani on Twitter was pointing out how far the immigration conversation has moved on the right in response to, there has already been U.S. citizens locked up, and there was one that was locked up for 48 hours, for 2 whole days before he was let go, a U.S. citizen. And at the beginning of his imprisonment, his mother was showing the people his Social Security card and his birth certificate, and they still wouldn't let him out. And there was somebody that responded to a blue check. They responded, was like, well, he was a U.S. citizen and he was let out after 48 hours. What's the big deal? Oh, and cool. And Jelani was pointing out how, like, that's crazy. Like, that's crazy that we are already at. Sometimes there's gonna be a couple of them that get locked up for a few days. It'll be okay. There's no big deal. That's where the immigration conversation is on the right now. And it's also worth pointing out that the reason that he was suspected of being an undocumented immigrant is because he was speaking a Mayan language, a language that has existed on this continent since before Columbus got here. I mean, just the irony and horribleness of that shouldn't be lost on folks. But yeah, I think, Matt, you were about to say something.
Yeah, it's also all these guys that drape themselves in like liberty and think that they represent freedom, and then whenever a Democrat is in the White House, they act like they're the next Alexander Solzhenitsyn, going to get sent to a gulag, and we literally have concentration camps, like you said, like detentions of green card holders or American citizens that have Social Security cards. I was reading Aviva Chomsky's Central America's Forgotten History. And I mean, the worrying and alarming thing about this trend is that the first thing that happens before death squads is the government starts labeling certain groups as persona non grata, and certain individuals as persona non grata. Then you start to get like these people, like you're seeing, these right wingers that they are authoritarian minded. They will follow this sort of reactionary attack wherever it leads. Now, the good news, in my opinion, if I want to get optimistic away from, staring into the abyss for a second there, is that they have to say the stuff about criminals, because most Americans, immigration polling is very sensitive to how it's phrased. So when you say like, oh, this person who has just been part of their community for 20 years and is just happened to be undocumented, do you want them sent away? If it's polled as they're illegal, people might say it. But if you phrase it like that, people say, no, why would we want to do that? Go after the scary people that Republicans have been doing propaganda against. People that, by the way, have been charged through our court systems. And then we say like their victims weren't given due process, but never mind that. Biden and Obama and those types of folks were already doing what that whole focus on the scary criminal-minded, scary migrant type of folks. And that's why Trump is already scraping the bottom of the barrel with those folks now. And one thing is there's a podcast called Reveal that did a good show earlier in the or in the Biden lame dunk period that went in. It had an immigration expert. I can't remember who it was. But they talked about how the actual border, the influx at the border under Trump took up a lot of resources for ICE and stuff, and border protection. And that's not the same as it was now, because the little truth that was understated by both parties up to the last election is that those crossings were dropping. And so now our border apparatus has more time and resources to go after folks that, pro-Israel group said that this person is an anti-Semite on a green card because they oppose sending bombs to Israel. Well, I guess we got time now to go get those people.
Right. Yeah, it's really scary. They will justify the imprisonment and deportation of U.S. citizens when it comes to it. That's scary to know and understand. We've got one more. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I mean, I just want like one quick thing. It's just that too, like, I really want people to note how they utilize the special exception, right? And like at this point, free speech conversations has become so muddled. Just use another example, right? An early one, if you remember from school, we have a bunch of amendments to the Constitution. The Third Amendment says that we can't quarter soldiers in your house. Even in wartime, right, which is a special moment, right? Oh, man, there's an army. Like, maybe we should be able to utilize these houses. You can make a practical argument for maybe why it might make sense to force quartering on people. But we explicitly said, our American Revolution tradition said, nope, we're not going to play any games with exceptions. This is what our tradition says very, very clearly. And this is not just about the Third Amendment. This goes through the Constitution. Says politics can't go here. Doesn't matter what kind of exception that you want to put forward. So all of these kind of arguments that you get from the right, from Gorka, are fundamentally contrary to like the American tradition, not just on the explicit sense of like, oh, this is free speech, but also on the special exception means that we can sort of bend the law. And I think it's really important to push back on that term as well, because the terrorism, the criminal, all this kind of stuff is used to sort of justify the unjustifiable.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. We've got one more clip that I wanted to react to, and that's from a Missouri state representative. This went a little viral on Twitter, I think, talking about paid leave. Folks will know that listen to the program that Missouri voters approved a ballot measure that will mandate paid leave for workers in Missouri. I think there are some exceptions to that, but that's the kind of broad thing. It also raised the minimum wage in Missouri a little bit, and so we can. It's a little long, and so we can kind of if there's something that you want to say, during the clip, let me know, and we'll pause. But he is not happy about this ballot measure having passed, and he has some explanations as to why why this whole thing, the whole idea that people can vote on things, maybe not a good thing. Let's listen to this guy.
This is one of those things of the problem with direct democracy. This is exactly what our founders were expressly against when they formed this nation. We're a constitutional republic with individual representation confined by constitutional restraints of what government can and can't do. And for us to think that the founders had in their mind's eye that we would be putting in front of every single voter and every single time with every single policy measure for them to decide whether or not this was good or policy or not, especially when the people casting the ballots for measures such as this, they have no skin in the game whatsoever when it comes to these sorts of measures.
Okay, so let's just stop it right there, and then we'll come back to the clip in a second. The idea, I mean, it's just so insane. The idea that working people do not have a skin in the game when it comes to, are we going to, should I be able to take some time off from work? I mean, there is no more skin in the game than being the person who will or won't get paid leave as a result of this ballot measure. And of course, what he's going to go on to say is the people who really have skin in the game are the people who sign the front of the checks, who do the back-breaking work of signing the front of the checks. They're the ones who should get to vote on stuff like this. But it's just like the contempt there for working people is just so obvious and frankly kind of surprising that he's willing to put it on display so prominently. It's crazy that he's just willing to say that.
Skin in the game is like you say, it's a beautiful thing for to say for like bosses, because right. I want to take my skin out of the game for one day. Is that okay?
Right. I mean, skin in the game, like literally, what's skin in the game. I think that's like a sports, like a sports sort of saying, and like you might get hurt. I mean, the people who might get hurt, who have skin in the game on the job, are the workers. Like, bosses are very rarely going to be the people who actually get hurt or killed on the job. And yet, we have a segment that we do every single week where we take a look at people who have died just in the last week. Employers who have been found liable for deaths on the job site that did not need to happen. 100 workers die on the job every single week. Thousands die of an occupational disease. Most of them do not need to happen. The most prominent occupational death is falls. People who fall from heights. We know how to not have that happen, and it's very easy. One of the other like top 5 most common deaths on the job site is trench collapses. We know how to stop trenches from collapsing. Right? But bosses don't want to do it because they don't want to spend the time or the money doing it. And so they are literally putting other people's skin in the game, their bodies, their skulls in the game so that they can save a few dollars. And so the people who actually go in the trenches obviously have skin in the game when it comes to, like you said, Matt, whether or not they can take their skin out of the game for a day or two and still get paid. I mean, it is just so effing gross. Let's continue.
This is one of those things of the problem with direct democracy. When it comes to these sorts of measures, no realization of the detriment or the harm that it may cause to their very own bottom dollar, because they may not even understand what these provisions, what these measures would do to their employer. I mean, because at the end of the day, the
Just
people,
too stupid.
most people casting these votes on these measures, they don't own businesses. They don't understand what's required to meet the bottom line, to keep people employed. We are not a direct democracy, and we got to stop telling our kids that we're a democracy, first and foremost, because we're not a democracy, or we are a republican form of government. We say the pledge every day. We say to the republic for which it stands, not the democracy for which it stands, and especially not the direct democracy for which it stands. And people can moan and they can groan, but it's the ones that moan and groan are probably not the ones signing the front of the checks that employ the people that are having to bear these costs.
You know, I can't help but note that this is the same kind of argument that was used to disenfranchise Americans. And this is why for a very long time in this country, particularly in the parts of the country that three of us live in, only property owner, let alone like black folks weren't allowed to vote, but also you weren't allowed to vote unless you owned property. And it was because these people never understand what raising taxes is going to do. You know, if they don't really have to pay them. I mean, this is as old as it gets, as despicable as it gets. And, you know, ask yourself, where does it end? You know, where does it end? I mean, it ends in saying, yeah, I don't think the votes matter. You know, I don't think people's votes matter unless they're from a certain class or a certain kind of group. I mean, it's fundamentally against the spirit of this country democracy. Yeah.
I genuinely think when you ever push like politicians to go here, though, it's probably a good sign that they're feeling some kind of pressure. Like, actually, we're a republic, not a democracy. Like, I don't know. That's maybe seemed more convincing when like guys wore those sort of white wigs and it was like sort of very alienated from like, bro, you look no offense, but you don't have the gravitas to be telling me that I can't have a say in what society is, where society's going.
I mean, speaking of gravitas, that Twitter menswear guy has totally broken my brain, because literally the first thing that I thought of when I saw that clip was coat too tight. It's like you need a bigger coat, because it's like coming apart. You need
to have a tailor if you want to disenfranchise people.
it's like literally coming apart and the button is fighting for its life to keep it, to keep his, roided out figure inside of the coat. It's like, buy a bigger coat. First thing that I thought of. So yeah, no gravitas in that guy. Well, I think that about does it. David, Matt, really appreciate y'all coming on. Do you have anything else that you want to leave us with before we let you go?
No, take care, friends. Check us out on Left Reckoning if you aren't already. We go live every Tuesday night at 6 Central, talking about politics, history, doing a lot of Southern labor stuff that people will probably be very interested in as well.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Check them out. I caught a little bit of a JFK discussion recently on the way home from the show. That was very fascinating. Big fan. Appreciate all y'all do. Appreciate y'all staying long with us today, for sure.
Yep. Matt Leck, David
likewise,
Griscom,
guys.
Left Reckoning. Appreciate your time. All right, folks, that is going to be it for the show today. Going to be it for the first new episode on Means TV.
Yeah, really excited to be a part of Means TV. Excited to, get more engaged and learn more about the project. Excited to tell more of our audience about the good work on Means TV, because we do this because bosses and politicians have their own media, right? The big corporations own the media by and large. And we think regular working people need a voice. We need our own media. So we do what we can with this project, putting out content online and on the radio. But Means TV is a platform for all kinds of content whether it's daily news programs, documentaries, original films and TV shows. And I think that's really important, right? To have a home for content that is critical of corporate power. And the more critical you are of corporate power, the less interested they are in putting you on their media, right? Yeah. So I think it's really cool what they're doing. I think it's a great project. I'm really excited about the collaboration. Like I said, I've been a subscriber for some time now, and I do believe we're going to have a subscriber code. If I'm not mistaken, we're gonna have a special deal for listeners of the Valley Labor Report. So not sure if we're ready to unveil that just yet, but stay tuned. And there should be a way to get plugged into Means TV by supporting us, in that process as well. And so excited about that partnership because I really want to help grow Means TV here in the South. I think it's important. And I really appreciate everyone tuning in today. I know we ran long, but we heard a lot of important conversations. Again, grateful for all the guests who came on today. It's always cool, with having a project like this that you can reach out to interesting people all over the world and be like, hey, do you want to come on my radio show? Yeah. And sometimes it actually works. And we get to hear from amazing guests. So for those of you who are new, who are on Means TV, every week we have different guests on the show, everybody from rank and file workers to, community activists, labor leaders, sometimes politicians and political candidates, lots of historians and journalists that we talk to as well about what they, are seeing and hearing. And so, we try to talk to interesting people, to help us learn more, if nothing else. And I really appreciate the folks who are willing to come on and appreciate all the folks who donate every month or every now and then. However you donate, we appreciate it. It does take money to run this operation. We have to pay to be on the air on the radio stations, or at least for some of the radio stations we're on. And we do pay our folks a living wage who work behind the scenes. And so, whatever you can do to support this project, whether it's chipping in a few bucks at tvlr.fm or, just liking and sharing our content, give us a call throughout the week. Leave us a voicemail, 844-899-TVLR. We got to open the show today with a update from Jacksonville, Alabama. Give us an update from wherever you're calling from, even outside the South, but especially in the South. We'd love to hear what's going on, if there's actions in your community. If your union's got a campaign, you heard about a new union campaign in town, we love to get those reports from folks. And, keep in mind that we also do take live call-ins. Typically, today was a busy show. We had a lot of guests, but we usually make space for calls during our overtime section of the show and like to get folks just like to get folks' perspective. It's really cool to facilitate those kind of conversations, because where else in media are you going to have these kind of conversations like we had today about worker power here in the South and union organizing and, looking at politics from a working class perspective. That's what we do. You may agree or disagree with, particular opinions or takes that we have, but just know that it's coming from that place of solidarity, a place of people power, a place of collective organization. That's what we think and what we believe. We want to see the working class of this country and this state, this region, and this world just be better off. We want to see more democratic power and control back into our hands as working people. And so we really appreciate all the support. This is a collective effort, and we can't do it without the support of all of y'all who tune in every week and who contribute and who engage with us. So thanks for all your support. We're going to keep on growing this project. We'll have some good stuff coming up. Excited about some of the guests we have on deck. And so just stay tuned with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have that code. We can go ahead and give that out. It is TVLR is our That's our Means TV code. That code will give you 20% off your first month or 20% off your annual subscription. So you can go ahead and subscribe for a whole year and get 20% off for the whole year or 20% off your first month. If you get the monthly subscription, that includes a 7-day free trial at code TVLR, and you can do that at means.tv. So there you go.
Yeah, it is worth the price of subscription just to get Means Morning News, in my opinion. And but check it out. You'll find something you like, I have no doubt, and you'll be supporting a great mission, a great project, because it is a worthy thing to build worker cooperatives in every kind of space. We focus on unions on this show, but we're also a big fan of worker cooperatives because again, it's about putting power back into the hands of the people. And so appreciate what they're doing with Means TV. Again, that code is TVLR, right? So you can sign up, get a discount, let them know we sent you.
All right. See y'all next week.